All right, agenda item 1, I call the regular meeting of the South Burlington School Board to order on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025 at 6:03 p.m. Agenda item 2, announcements and amendments to the agenda. Do we have any announcements or amendments to the agenda?
So we've just had a very productive conversation with the city council, and I want to thank our Safe Routes to School representatives who came. And because of that, we've been discussing filling board member Elaine Sisai's spot on that team. So I want to add that to agenda. I want to make that agenda 5C this evening to have that conversation publicly.
Good. I'd also like to note that our regular agenda lists at the top the executive session to follow regular meeting is an executive session.
At all. Yes.
Executive session. Just to be clear, our agenda at the very top says executive session to follow regular meeting. There is no executive session. Any other announcements or amendments?
As part of my my superintendent's report, under item 6B, our communications coordinator is going to provide budget communication information, and then following that, our 5 principals and I are going to share a budget presentation for the community.
Any other announcements or amendments to the agenda? All right, agenda item 3, comments from the public. This is the community's opportunity to share feedback and concerns with the board. We ask that you keep your comments concise, 2 to 3 minutes, and that you refrain from using any information that would identify a specific person. Please raise your hand in the room or use the Zoom raised hand feature. We will only use the online chat to manage any tech issues. We are not able to take action on any issues brought to us during public comment. However, any board member may suggest tonight that the issue or question be added to a future agenda for discussion. We may also delegate addressing issues to our superintendent, President Nichols. It is always helpful if you can email us a copy of your comments for follow-up. As a reminder, this is for public comment not related to items on the agenda. And if you could also please state whether or not you're a resident of South Burlington in your comment, that would be helpful. Do we have any comments from the public? Please come up to the podium and state your name and where you're a resident.
Hi, my name is Kate Jarvis. I'm a resident of South Burlington. I just wanted to say that regardless of whether this budget should be accepted, approved, or whatever it ends up being, like if we have to go through multiple rounds of votes, I think we have a bigger problem at hand, which is how do we get the residents of South Burlington to care about educating the youth here? And I mean, I think there's some kind of crazy statistic like 80% of the residents don't have kids in South Burlington schools, which makes it very difficult to make them care. But the only idea that I had was that there needs to be some way of getting our amazing youth and amazing teachers out into the community so that literally people can learn what you guys are learning, what amazing people you're turning out to be, and what incredible things our teachers are teaching them. And, you know, to me, that's the only way that we're going to get people to actually care and actually show up to vote and actually pass budgets. So I don't have any more solutions beyond that, but I really think that is our biggest problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments from the public on items not related to the agenda?
Good evening. My name's Oliver Pearson. I'm a resident of South Burlington. Lucky to have two students in the school system, 8th grader and 5th grader. I did want to make a comment on the budget. I know it's on the agenda, Chair, but with your permission, I'll continue with this comment. Wanted to speak about one aspect of the budget the board approved earlier this month. Recognizing this budget is full of hard choices. It was product of a significant amount of work from the school board and the leadership. We mentioned I'm a public servant and serve on boards as well, so I have a small window into the realities that you all face as you complete your roles and in your service to the community. Wanted to speak about one cut that, from my perspective, really only provides minimal budgetary savings, about 0.2% of the overall $71.5 million budget, but would lead to significant negative impacts that would be felt by students and families throughout our community. And I'm referring to the roughly $140,000 reduction to athletics programming that will cut JV football, ball cheer, JV boys soccer, JVP boys basketball, JVP baseball, and gymnastics programs, as well as reduce funding for night games, uniforms, equipment, and supplies. As a parent of an eighth grader, I sort of feel this cut acutely. Most of the sports programs that are being cut are sort of what I view as entry-level teams for high schoolers that are predominantly filled by freshmen. As I read the budget, it seemed that besides eliminating Japanese language and perhaps eliminating the big picture program, I couldn't figure out if that's reduced or cut. The only other cuts to actual programs are these eliminations of these different sports teams. These sports teams are coming at a time when students are new to the high school, they're working they're existing in a more difficult social and academic environment, and the community that sports teams can provide to freshmen, sophomores as well is extremely important for their physical and emotional well-being. Numerous studies have also shown that participation in high school sports has these great positive outcomes and benefits for students, such as lower chances of dropping out, higher grade point average, greater likelihood of attending college, and just help improve their overall academic performance.
Oliver, that's about time. Are you almost already?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I felt that the board's vote to adopt this budget was a bit rushed. I wish there'd been more time to consider. I know the budget is warned. I would just wanted to go on record as being concerned and opposing this cut. And in the chance that the budget has to be voted on a second time, I would like to ask the board to reconsider these cuts to athletics, given the small overall contribution to reducing the budget and the important impact that they have for students in our community. Thank you.
Also, thank you, Oliver, as a member of our finance committee. Thank you for your service.
Hello, my name is Alex McHenry. I live in South Burlington and I have kids who are in South Burlington schools. I want to comment on the board meeting from 2 weeks ago in which you probably made the most important decision of the year, which is the budget for the upcoming year. However, towards the end of the meeting, somebody mentioned that they had to leave to meet company at their house and suggested the meeting either be tabled or adjourned early. And I think that is in really poor taste to suggest that something that is so important and so big be put off because you have to get home so you can let your friends in. If it was me, what I would have done is I would have called them or texted them and said, here, come to the board meeting. I'll give you the keys to the house and you can go to my house, let yourselves in, and I will drive myself home when the board meeting is adjourned. That way, I don't have to compromise the integrity of the board meeting and I don't have to rush such an important decision. A second comment that I have is on other paper articles. I'm not exactly sure where things stand with which topic on other paper articles, but I believe it was brought up that the board expansion article is coming up soon. Is that correct? Can you verify? If you don't know, that's fine. But what I will say is that an article about board expansion should have been done months ago. In fact, I think every board member should be ringing the bell loudly that there are 2 additional board positions coming up this coming year. And with the difficulty that we have had in recruiting quality candidates and the difficulty with attrition on the board, that's a very serious problem. And you end up with people who on the board who do not care enough to give it their best. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room?
Evening. My name is Allison Crum, and I'm a parent of an 8th grader and a 5th grader in the South Burlington School District. And I also wanted to speak today about the difficult decisions you've had to make about the budget and my feeling as a parent about potentially the juice not being worth the squeeze on sports. I come from a mental health background, and I know a lot of the funding decisions you have to make are you're being pushed to support the social emotional being of students. And particularly, and this is happening across the United States, but also in Vermont, sports have become a bit pay to play. And kids are getting in early who have that privilege. And JV seems like such an important time to bring a sense of belonging and community. And when you read the Surgeon General's report on mental health in youth, they're very specific on what belonging, inclusion, and community can do. So I'm really hopeful that maybe there's an opportunity to find, I know the budget is a very specific process, but maybe a proposition that could be introduced, like a student activities restoration proposition that could be voted on independent of the base budget. Tall order, I know, but putting it out there for any potential consideration.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room for items not related to the agenda?
Good evening. My name is Kara McDonough, and I've been an early childhood special educator in this district since 2005. In that time, I've seen this program grow from 2 part-time classrooms in 2 schools to 3 classrooms in all our schools, serving children in the morning and afternoon, and also an outreach component added to serve the children in the community who are in need of special education services. In my time here, I've always felt that we were working towards something and providing children and families with quality special education services. I do not feel that way now. We are spread thin, facing cuts that will directly affect the quality of education that our preschool families will receive, which is not being touted in the message from the school board. We have students in our classroom that are in need of much more than we can provide with staff that we have now. I'm wondering if you're aware of the high needs that we are currently serving. I invite you to visit the classrooms or take a ride with me, visit our community preschools daily to see what's going on outside of the school board. There are children who are non-mobile, non-speaking, medically fragile, and children with trauma that are needing one-to-one support to access their education and stay safe. If you're planning on taking away our classroom teachers while not reducing the number of children that are in the classroom, then you're putting these children in danger and misleading families. I know that any parent in the district would rather have student-facing positions kept in the budget over adding a new $180,000 admin position that isn't servicing students, which I may add, our former special education director did not have. It also had other duties that have now been farmed out to other professionals. No one in the day-to-day business of teaching students would say they felt the absence of a special education administrator, but they sure do feel and will feel the absence of a classroom teacher. Why would you not invest in South Burlington's youngest learners to ensure that you're not going to have to pay later on for services that might not have been necessary if they were addressed sooner? I will end by saying that you're making decisions without really looking at the data. We as preschool professionals only today saw that the board had a pre-K information update on the agenda for the meeting, yet the entire pre-K team, including our administrators, were unaware of this update. This further demonstrates the lack of collaboration and transparency with the stakeholders. Again, what the board is putting on the community is not the reality of the situation.
Hi, my name is Alex Sedendo. I'm a speech language pathologist in the early ed department. Dear preschool families, I'm sorry you continue to receive communication from the district that is not reflective of the reality we see each day in our classroom. I'm sorry that the trust and faith you put in this district continues to be violated. I'm sorry that your tax dollars are being reallocated away from early education, which we know is essential and effective, to fund a $180,000 associate special ed director. I'm sorry the board chair will not meet with our teachers union to hear about what happens between our walls when you don't have eyes on your children. I'm sorry your students' PT services since October are not being implemented because we can't attract anyone to apply to the job due to the disparaging pay. I'm sorry if that hasn't been transparently communicated to you as well. I'm sorry the district is going to prioritize high preschool class sizes in order to obtain your Act 166 funding while cutting 20% of the staff, resulting in detrimental decreases to the support we're able to provide. I'm sorry when your child falls and cries, I will not be able to hold them until they stop crying. I'm sorry that I will not be able to provide the level of intensified services needed to support your child's communication. I'm sorry that when a staff member falls ill and needs to call out, there's a high probability we'll have to cancel our classrooms due to licensing. I'm sorry I can't answer your questions about where our classrooms will be next year or what they will look like. Our special ed director said we could start talking about that in February. I'm sorry I don't know what the data and spreadsheets are. The Board of Ed refers to them in their emails. I haven't seen them, and I've been asking since 2 days before Thanksgiving when my job was cut without any notice in a group meeting. I'm sorry your child's tuition money is more valuable than the quality of their education. I'm sorry I will need to choose which child to support and fire to put out. I'm sorry your child's education is being sacrificed while the salaries at the central office continue to increase. I'm sorry our district leadership misconstrues staff cries for additional special ed support is needing to hire another administrator. In preschool this year, we've had amazing PD from Beth Peloquin around supporting problem solving. The first step in problem solving is naming the problem. Our executive board is extremely disconnected from the staff, students, and families they are supposed to be serving. Step 2 is to think of some solutions. I invite our executive board, Violet, Jody, Kristen, who all have a role in preschool directly or indirectly, as well as our building principals, to physically share space with us and talk about our program. I've been asking for 2 years and people say that will never happen. I really hope it does, and I invite you
Alex,
to join us.
that's time, Alex. Sorry
Thank
about,
you.
sorry about that.
I also think a solution starts with meeting with our union. Thank you so much.
Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Diane Nelson. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am asking that you please pause in ratifying Superintendent Nichols' contract as it will negatively impact chances for the budget to pass. I request a new formal, well-run superintendent search since the one almost 3 years ago was mismanaged and did not include community input and ignored recommendations from the superintendent search committee. I appreciate the communications I've had with the board on this topic. I started expressing my concern beginning in June 2024. I was compelled to act based on situations I witnessed when I was a former paraeducator and worked within the school and saw firsthand the lack of presence of the executive team, just as these teachers had mentioned. I can verify what they said. I've actually reached out to the Vermont Family Network and even the Vermont Agency of Education with my concerns as both a former school employee and as a parent. This is so nerve-wracking to be up here because nobody wants to feel negative about their school district. And I know it doesn't come with a lack of good intention, but when the skill set doesn't meet the job at hand in such a challenging time, this is what we end up with. Because if this was a successful hire, the board and the superintendent's relationship with the community members and educators would have improved, but they've further deteriorated. Much money has been sent on new programs and central office administrative hires and continues in this budget this cycle, yet student performance and community satisfaction with the school district has dropped. This school just needs a battle-tested leader with vision, depth of experience, and someone adept at building strong community connections. We have not realized it yet, and as a community, we no longer have the patience to provide even more money for something that is not working. Please do not ratify the superintendent's contract. Please conduct a superintendent search. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Heiss. I moved to South Burlington in 2018 because I believe these were the best schools in our state. And I also have 2 children in the school district and 2 to enter next year. So I have a lot at stake here. What I want to say tonight, is that the school board is incredibly important and it's important to families, students, and our community in general. And I want to thank each one of you for your service because I know this is a lot of time, energy, and emotional work, to be honest. Participation on this board should be easy and accessible, and participation should be inclusive. I would like to comment today for public record and also to make sure anybody in this room or watching online knows, that there are 6 seats open for town meeting today. 2 seats for 1-year terms, 2 seats for 2-year terms, and 3 seats for 3-year terms, according to the city clerk's email to me today. These positions are not posted on the South Burlington School Board's website. They're not posted on the city clerk's website. And as far as I can tell, they were not shared on online community boards and they were not shared via, inter-school communication such as email. If you're interested in running for one of these offices, there's still time. A completed consent form and a completed petition with 30 names of South Burlington registered voters is required to be on the ballot. These items are available to you through the city clerk's counter, so you'll have to go in person, which is a barrier to accessibility. I could send you a link, and I'll also post on the South Burlington Facebook groups. Once you get those signatures and you complete, it's a very short form, it's like 10 questions. You'll have to return them to the city clerk at the library building on City Hall, 5 p.m. this Monday, January 27th. So you have less than a week, but there's so much time and we will support you as a community. I had to email the city clerk to get this information and it's required multiple emails. I still don't have the information that I've requested beyond what seats are open. The links that were provided to me were not to anything that would help me to run for this board. And they sent me all over the place to showing people that were in current offices or positions, but nothing to suggest to me how
Sarah,
it would
I
actually.
apologize.
I'm almost
I
done,
almost
thank
said
you.
thank you.
So as a community member, I'm incredibly disappointed. I think it's unfair, inaccessible, not inclusive. It might be an accident, but the fact that it's not on the school board's website, I can't even put beside myself. And the fact that I had to email 2 times and I still don't have information about how to actually apply, is not acceptable. I encourage people to run. I hope you do. I'll post the information for you. I would like the school
Sarah,
board to put
thank
this
you.
on a, I would like you
That's
to
fine.
put it on a future agenda, please. I
Sarah,
expect for it to be
I
there.
ask you to thank you, appreciate it, really do appreciate it. And I do need to make one clarification. Sarah, I apologize. I think you said there were 3 3-year seats open. I don't believe that's true. We have 2 1-year seats, which are 1 year finishing out 2 2-year terms. We have 2 2 years that are open. We have 2 3 years that are open. Chairman Tillingham's seat is not up for contest right now. So I just want to clarify.
So then that is like quote from the city clerk. So then the city clerk doesn't even know what openings there are.
So that there are 7 board seats. 1 is not up for election right now, but the other 6 are. So
I think that this information needs blasted in the next 24 hours. It is so unacceptable that it's this hard to figure out how to be up here serving with you. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Lauren McBride, and I'm here to respectfully request that the board delay Superintendent Nichols' contract renewal and implement a process that prioritizes meaningful input from educators, administrators, and community partners. Concerns raised by key stakeholders cannot be ignored. The teachers' union's rejection of the proposed budget cuts highlights a potential lack of trust and collaboration with the superintendent. Additionally, the recent completion of the listening tour conducted by the NEA underscores ongoing unease about the superintendent's leadership. While the other paper may contain some factual inaccuracies regarding the superintendent's contract, the central issue is one of transparency between the board and the community. Since the summer, the community has sought information and involvement in this process, only for the press to reveal that the board moved forward without public awareness, despite continued stakeholder outreach. This lack of transparency raises serious concerns, including potential violations of Vermont's open meeting law, which requires discussions about the superintendent's contract to be included on public agendas.
The absence of these discussions from recent board minutes and executive agendas undermines the trust and highlights the need for a more inclusive and transparent process. At a time where we are facing budget cuts and teacher contract negotiations, this lack of trust can erode this process, which will have detrimental impact on our students. Tonight, I urge you to take a step back, to slow down the ratification process and commit to engaging with voices of the most affected. Educators, administrators, and community members are asking for a seat at the table in this critical decision. Delaying the renewal process would demonstrate a willingness to listen, to rebuild trust, and to ensure that all perspectives are heard and considered. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I trust that you will make a thoughtful decision in the best interest of our schools, our staff, and most importantly, our students. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura, do you mind emailing that to me? I would like for all of you to stick around because action, excuse me, agenda item 8, where we have action items, is where a lot of these concerns are going to be addressed. And so I would hate for you to leave and not hear the prepared board statements that address these concerns.
Thank you.
And part of that process is compiling all of the feedback that we've heard and systematically addressing it. There's a specific point that you just made that I would like to address. So if you're able to email that, that would be great.
I have to leave for another job, so when I leave, I'll listen to it the next day and email you guys.
And there's a conflicting high school and as well for 8th grade parents, which I'm looking for as well.
I'm gonna listen to it all.
My name is Laura Smith. I am a resident and I have 2 students, an 8th grader and a current freshman. And I just wanted to echo the request to reconsider the sports reduction that's in the budget today. In addition to all the points that were already raised, that reduction will also impact important fundraising that is done by our SB Boosters Club by eliminating those night sports games, which is one of our biggest fundraising areas. And the SB Boosters does not only support and supplement key requests for our sports teams, but we also support all the awesome clubs that are available to all of our students who might not enjoy the sports team. So it has a bigger impact than just sports, not to mention the night games are a lot of fun for our students. That's taking away a key event. I also want to echo the request to reconsider the pre-K cuts. Both of my children either went through the pre-K program or access services. Without that scaffolding, they would not be the successful students that they are today. At that time, the pre-K program was only available in the morning. I work full-time, as does my spouse. So we hired a babysitter to take my son to and from those classes, and to ask a parent that doesn't have that kind of flexibility to hire a sitter or work from home as I do, and sometimes bring it myself, is a huge burden to our entire community. So I just ask you to really take advantage of their offer to go into those classrooms and see kids. They need those services, and removing them is just a huge detriment to this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room?
Sure. Beth Adrian, I am one of the co-presidents of the South Burlington Educators Association. So I have a short statement. As representatives of the student-facing faculty and staff of the South Burlington School District, tonight we urge the community to get involved and vote yes for the budget. We want to be clear that we see a problem of process and leadership, which cannot be ignored or budgeted away. Involvement and voting yes is the only way we see to create a better vision and improve leadership. Thank you.
Any other public comment in the room?
Name is Kate Jarvis, and what I didn't mention earlier is that I have twins in high school. And I just would like to say that I've heard over several meetings, people say that there are, there's money being taken away from education and from teachers and from sort of necessary supports and going to the central office. And I just wish to state that I really do not think that the money is being taken away from education and given as a fat salary to administrators. I think that is really not the case at all. I'm terribly sad to hear about the preschool cuts. I have a child with special needs. I can't imagine what would have been like if we couldn't have had some help when she was in preschool. But I don't think, it's not a case of taking from one pile and giving to another. I just don't think that's how it happens. Furthermore, I just wish to say that I've also heard comments from the public about, reducing administrators like assistant principals and things like that. And I just think that's absolutely crazy. You cannot run a school or a school district without administrators. It's just not possible. And finally, I just wish to say that while I may be biased, I really feel that Violet Nichols has done an excellent job as superintendent, and I really don't think most people have even the vaguest idea of how complicated and complex and challenging that role is. Thank you.
Are we allowed to talk multiple times? I'm like, I don't want this.
Call for the orders of the day. We are,
It is 6:34.
you know,
And that, I want to be sensitive to the public comment here, but this also isn't a public forum. The board's only role tonight is not to solely listen. We were supposed to conclude with comments from the public by 6:19 and it's now 6:34. And if you'd like to hear what the board has to say in response to many of these issues, we need to move on. So if there's any comments that have not been represented already that would like to be brought up, now is the time.
And my name is Sarah Heiss. In the spirit of having dialogue and discussion and inclusivity in these conversations, I like hearing that some of the elementary schools are having PTO meetings with members of the board. That's been encouraging, and I will be at mine in, I think, a week and a half. I would like you to host more of those meetings, advertise them more, and maybe even like coffees with the superintendent. So these can actually be dialogues and not just people having their hearts race to get their say in within 2 minutes. I'd love to have a conversation, and I know I represent a lot of parents just through today's conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. As a point of clarification, board members are invited to all budget presentations and we go based on availability.
just made aware of something on the Zoom that has.
Yes, we're gonna move on next. Anyone else in the room? Can we unmute Erin Sutherland, please?
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Ah, I think I'm unmuted. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello?
We can hear you, Erin.
Okay, all right, sorry. I'm at the JVB basketball game. And so it's a little noisy. I'm in the hallway and obviously I'm speaking to this. I have a sophomore that's been on JVB for 2 years and it's been really such an important way to transition into the high school, like everybody has said. But echoing that, I'm literally looking at 16 boys right now who could be out vaping and destroying property, and they're here and they're working with a coach who's getting paid pennies. So I really think the $140,000, when I look at how much some of the other salaries are, it really doesn't make sense. That's one. Two is, 2 of my 4 kids went to the preschool, and I don't think anybody in the district deserves more support than the preschool. It is such a difficult job. It's hard to get peers to come to these programs. It's just a ton of work, and I really hope that we open our eyes to that. And third of all, I think Kate Jarvis makes a nice point about getting the community involved. parents aren't allowed into the schools, so we can't actually see how amazing the schools are, which is a huge issue. We're treated like criminals. And while I do believe getting the community involved is the way to pass this budget, when we see how much administrators are making, that does not sit well with people who are trying to buy groceries. So I really think to get on board, we need to take a deep dive in, and some people need to be able to say, I'm not taking a raise. Thank you.
Please unmute, Jen Lawrence. Jen, are you there? We can't hear you if you're speaking.
See the mic. Sure.
Send her a note, Chelsea.
Can you all hear me or not?
Now we can, Jen.
Now you can. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thanks. My name is Jennifer Lawrence. I live in South Burlington. I just wanted to say I sincerely appreciate all of the work that goes into the budget development and the role of the school board members. But I must also express my concern as a parent of students within the South Burlington School District. I've rallied behind budget increases in the past, including the 2024 budget, which finally passed on the third vote, but must echo the sentiment of many others that have spoken tonight. The optics when we're cutting student-facing positions and programs to increase administrative salaries is not a good one and is going to become very difficult to get behind and advocate for and try to help garner traction within our community. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Is there any other public comment at this time? With that, we are going to move on to agenda item 4, our student representative report.
Thank you. The Division I Indoor Track State Championship is this Sunday, January 26th. Come to the UVM Indoor Track at 9 a.m. to watch your Wolves compete in relays, sprinting, jumping, and distance. And Wednesday, January 29th is a late start for both middle and high school students and a half day for elementary school students. So the school day at SBHS and Tuttle will begin at 10:35 a.m. and there'll be an early dismissal at 12:30 p.m. for elementary students. And finally, Allie and I would like to remind students who are going to be 18 by town meeting day that they are able to vote on this year's budget. To learn more about voting on town meeting day and registering to vote, please visit the South Burlington City website for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to agenda item 5, discussion items. But first, we have finance committee. Would you like to take this one?
Do I want to take it? Sure. Actually, maybe I'll read this as part of that, if that's okay. That'd be okay.
Sure.
Or is there a better spot for that?
There's a better spot.
Better spot, okay. Thank you. So at this point, I don't really have any update for the finance committee, so.
I did welcome our finance committee members here tonight to introduce them to the board. And we're just trying to reframe the best use of the finance committee from this point. Are there finance committee members here who'd like to come up and just introduce yourselves? You don't have to, but I thought it would be nice if the board could meet you and come on up.
Hi, I'm Kate Bailey, a member of the finance committee.
Good evening once again, Oliver Pearson, also a member of the finance committee, hoping to get more involved. Haven't been as involved as I'd like, but this is a critical time hope to contribute to the discussion. I think my earlier comments notwithstanding, working with the community to support this budget, getting to a yes vote is extremely important. I'm a big believer in public education. Coming from a family of school teachers, this is something that I feel strongly about and look forward to working with Chris, Tim, other members of the finance committee, the chair, Kate, to achieve that goal. Thank you.
I think some there were some of our student representatives from the finance committee who were here for the steering committee that was earlier. This evening, so I'm glad that they were.
Any questions from the board about the finance committee at this time? I think we are seeking feedback on the most useful way to spend the finance committee's time at this point. Would you agree with them?
Sorry, yes, it's been a bit of a challenge with everything going on to really get it organized and move it forward, so, I don't want to make sure, I want to make sure we are using everybody's time appropriately. It's been a bit of a challenge over the last few weeks, so.
All right, next is the other paper, and I'd like to use this agenda item to state a correction. So I submitted a request to the OP editor regarding the article published last week entitled Superintendent Renewal Stirs Concern. And the corrections were accepted, and I received receipt from the editor that they would be reflected online in the paper copy this week. I would like to revise a portion of what I stated on Front Porch Forum. I indicated that Superintendent Nichols has taken a 50% reduction in her annual increase, but this figure does not account for the possible performance pay that she may be awarded at the next superintendent performance evaluation, which would change that reduction percentage, assuming a favorable performance evaluation. I did not jump to post this additional correction to Front Porch Forum since we had already exceeded our monthly posting limit, and Front Porch Forum had already kindly granted us an additional posting in order to post the corrections that were received and changed by the other paper. I would also like to, I've added the other paper articles back to our formal agenda because trying to organize who's writing what and get the deadlines in offline has not been effective. I'd like to offer to write the next OP article, and I was thinking about crafting an article that responds to the concerns that we've heard and discusses our governance model, policy governance, if the board is amenable to that, and also open to other ideas about the best use of our next OP article submission. I could include also details about running for the board. I have information from the city clerk to share this evening about running for our open seats on the board. But I'm looking for feedback from the board about what you'd like this to look like.
When are articles due, Chelsea, for?
I think we will have already missed the submission for
Did we
January,
miss
so
this
this
one?
would be a February article.
Which would potentially be too late for running for the board because petitions have to be in by the 27th, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think it could address how to run, but I think issues of accessibility, issues of who can be on the board, which is anyone, and what roles the board is tasked with could be useful information for the community.
I like the idea of policy governance. That's I kind of thought I had an idea when I came on, and I was surprised how constrained or our ability to effectuate change in the district is through policy governance, and we really do rely on our superintendent to knock it out of the park, and just that awareness and digging into the details and actually reading the policies, very informative to change my outlook on how to approach the work and how to engage the community and respond to feedback of this isn't a board, this is, this goes to the CEO, or so just that I think that would be awesome, because it will be too late for them.
And I would recommend that for those of us who are running for seats, that we submit an article to the other paper describing our positions and why we're running. So I don't think having Chairman Tillinghast, right, the OP article prevents us from submitting those as well. That would be my recommendation, but I actually.
Yeah, you would all write to the editor and that would be considered campaigning. So I actually think it would be best practice for me to write the February article from the board so that none of your views is represented as
You'd go a little rogue and submit a letter to the editor, just on my statement of the budget, but I'm not running, it's not getting, it's. See budget pass then.
Can we just clarify? I know I asked for our last meeting, I didn't feel like I got a super clear answer to board members, and I was stating their intentions for this upcoming election. So Chris is not running. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm currently collecting signatures, but still reserving judgment.
Yeah, I'm running.
So Karen is collecting signatures so that she has the option, but it's not decided. Laura is definitely running.
And Laura, I just want to clarify, you're running for one of the 3-year seats, correct? Because I think we have to specify the seat, one of the seats that we're running. That may be helpful for the community to understand, so they identify.
I left that blank.
Because I think when we submit it, we have to specify.
When you submit it, you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to share that.
I guess, I don't know, I just left it blank, but I guess I'll do it right.
And I do plan to run for a 3-year term, so not that I don't enjoy campaigning, but.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Tim. I know I didn't get that. Oh, you can't hear me. Sorry. Yes, I'm running. 3-year term. Thank you, Kate. Sorry.
Laura, anything else about the OP article for now? Where I will believe this is, I'm writing the February article related to the community concerns that we've heard and how they relate back to our governance model. Is that right?
Yes.
We don't typically take public comment during this time, but
I'll ask a question. Can I go back to the point in the finance committee? I was thinking about what Tim said about how to best use the finance committee, and I'm happy if you say no. I just had a thought as we were discussing the other paper about the previous agenda item as a member of the finance committee. Feel free to defer it to the next meeting if you prefer.
if you don't mind, if we can defer and
We can defer.
and
It's
we
not
can
urgent.
make it an agenda item.
Yes, the point was just maybe there's some lessons learned from the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee of 2020 that both Chris and I served that allow us to think about as we gear up this time around in the finance committee.
Great, Oliver. Okay, we added a third item to this agenda, which is directing a board member to sit on the Safe Routes to School Task Force, filling Helene's seat. I do not have capacity to serve in this role at this time. Yes. Do you have a helpful clarification point as a member of our Safe Routes to School Task Force? Please come up and help us.
If folks have chances to ground and to listen to this, it's a wider call. Hi, Kate Bailey, member of the Safe Routes to School Task Force, sucker for committees. So my clarification, I am an appointed member of the Safe Routes to School Task Force representing the board and the community at large. I don't have students, I don't have children, and I don't have students in the district. And the position, the appointment that Elaine was filling was for either somebody that is connected to the school district by either being a parent, a staff member, or a student themselves. And so I think that position would be really critical to be filled, because when you're relying on my voice to represent the school community, that my perspective into the district is limited by not being in the schools every day, the same way that parents and PTO presidents like Elaine and students and staff are. So that's my request as a fellow member of the Safe Routes to Schools Task Force, that the position be filled by someone who is well connected to the schools. and can help me message, the important work of the Safe Routes to Schools Task Force within the schools.
So not a board member.
Preferably not. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, so then perhaps the action step there is to share with our community that we're seeking someone from these specific stakeholder groups, a parent or I think we have students on the task force, right? Yeah, so possibly a student as well. Would you say that that's the best stakeholder group to target for representation as parents or students? Maybe you could put that in the newsletter. Awesome. Okay, with that, we'll move to agenda item 6, superintendent's report. And as a note, we added an agenda item between the FY26 budget communication plan with our communications coordinator and the pre-K program information. In between there is a updated, what did we call it? Budget presentation with
Yes, our 5 principals and I will provide a budget presentation as a team.
Great, thank you. So off you go.
Great. Hi, thanks for being here, everyone. Board of Cooperative Educational Services, often referred to as BOCES, are something that Vermont is slowly introducing. And as we are in a position where we're contracting based on financial limitations, I'm really trying to increase partnerships so that we can continue offering programming to students. So as a Champlain Valley Superintendents Association, we've really looked into this and worked with some partners in New York. Based on the way that the Vermont BOCES model is written, it doesn't seem that it's sustainable at this point in time. The Massachusetts model for BOCES is pretty compelling. However, it involves a significant amount of community support and funding with that. So at this time, the Champlain Valley superintendents, and I'm part of that, are not actively moving forward to pursuing any of these. It's not a viable use of resources or time. However, we're going to advocate for modification of the bill language to have it be something that can be sustained in Vermont, because I think it's a good idea. And as districts like ours across the state grapple with changes in funding, I think this is a way that we can work together and to provide resources for our students through regional partnerships. So that concludes my BOCES update. I am.
Would you mind if I ask just a question or two?
Yeah.
I'm curious because this seemed to be like such a big push from the legislature. And
Yeah.
there seemed to be such hope around it. And I'm curious if you and the other superintendents plan on putting together some sort of a summary document of your perspectives and what you might submit to the legislature for updates or request changes in the legislation. So.
Yeah, there's not a formal push from CVSA to do that at this time, but I'm fortunate to have the ears of some of our legislators. And I was exchanging email correspondence with Senator Ron Hinsdale last night, tied to advocating for funding to support our students in our schools, and she invited me to speak at an upcoming ed meeting, and so I think that's a good opportunity for me to open that conversation to the committee, who's got some authority and some real actionable space there.
Great. Thank you.
So that's the next step so far.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'd now like to turn it over to our communications coordinator, Julia McGuire, and she is going to talk about the district's plan to communicate about the budget and share information and some of the ways that folks can get involved. I want to thank everyone who's reached out, asking how to support this and what community efforts we can do. So as a district, Julia's created some resources, and I will turn it over to her. She's joining us remotely.
Hi, thank you. I think Nick has the slides that I put together to show what I've been working on. Sorry, let me just open it on my computer too. So Yeah, so this year we've been really trying to find the right avenues to be presenting the budget and really highlighting a lot of great things about the schools. So that's been the focus. But first and foremost, if you go to the next slide, the budget website is available on our website, but there's a button that links directly to it from the homepage. I circled it there. And Nick, if you could just click on that link, then that'll open the page just so we can kind of walk through it. This has the link to the budget newsletter, which I'll get into in a minute, is linked there, as well as every budget presentation that's been done since November, our timeline, and just all anything related to the budget can be found on this website, including some information about Vermont school funding. So I think it's a good resource. It's a little bit more on the dry side of information, but if you're looking for just some explanations about stuff, that this is the best place to go. And it also has the button to calculate your tax rate, which was brought up at a board meeting, I think the last two board meetings ago, and just some other great resources there. So then the budget newsletter was posted to Front Porch Forum and Facebook, and as well to our website. And this is kind of an FAQ, but also just a little bit of more information about what is happening with this budget, as well as information about our schools. I think someone spoke to about the fact that I think it's about 60% of South Burlington doesn't have any kids in the district, so it's hard for them to know more about them. But there are a lot of great resources which are listed in this newsletter, which links to a lot of great Instagram pages that many of the teachers or principals are running directly from the schools, as well as the district's Instagram and Facebook page, which is always posting great information across all the schools, talking about academic, co-curricular, and just events and things that are happening around the schools on a day-to-day basis. So I think that those are really great resources if people want to get to know the schools a little bit better. I also included some other Instagram accounts that are worth following, including our robotics team, Batteries Not Included, as well as Ben Majors, who's our security officer at the high school, who takes really amazing photographs of mostly sports events, but he also takes has taken pictures of other events at the high school, and those are really pretty exceptional. So I would recommend checking him out. And so if you go to the next slide. Did we go to the next one? Sorry. So that was the newsletter, and then so that's the newsletter, which will also be included in the superintendent's newsletter this week, and I think principals will also be sharing it. So hopefully we'll get that out as widely as possible to the community, not just within the school community, but the community at large. Okay, we go to the next slide. So Superintendent Nichols and Tim Jarvis, as well as I think some board members, have been attending some of these meetings. They're going to, and some of these meetings have already happened, and many of these are upcoming. They're going to every school staff meeting, as well as their PTO and the boosters at the high school, to discuss the budget and talk to both staff and families about what's included. As well, they'll do a town meeting TV presentation, and they'll be presenting to the South Burlington Rotary and the South Burlington Small Business Association in the coming weeks as well. And all the information for those meetings is there. And then if you go to the next slide. So this is also a flyer that we're working on that would get mailed to every residence in South Burlington, similar to something that we did last year. This design is obviously still in flux. Things are not final there, but that should probably go out sometime in February. And this will include a little bit more of the financial information, while still highlighting pictures of students and information about how to vote. So look for that in your mailbox in the coming weeks. And then the next slide. And then, so these are a bunch of graphics that I created to kind of highlight some of the more detailed, or some of the kind of minute, not minutia, but like the more specific details about the budget in a little bit more of ingestible information. And these graphics are available to download from our website. Those are also linked on the budget page, and they'll also be included in Superintendent Nichols' newsletter this week. And there's the link. So if you just want to run through, these are some of the, so this is just basic voting information. And then you go to the next slide. This is just some highlights of the budget that is what's included there. And then the next one is some more financial information. This is more the specific breakdown of what the budget is comprised of. And then the next one is comparative tax rates across all the districts to show that South Burlington has the second lowest, which is a good statistic to be sharing. And then this one is kind of some information gathered across the schools that's touching more on social emotional learning, just highlights of things that have happened at the schools. I also pulled some just like really interesting courses that are available at the high school, and highlights of some other curricular things that have happened in the last year, I would say, just like cover and what's upcoming for sporting events in the next season. So that's just some interesting stuff to have there. And then the next one, this is highlights of some alumni. We've got some nice quotes from 2 past students, and then as well as just like some other highlights of what some current alumni are doing now, just to show what's possible after you graduate from the district. And then these are just some other ones that could be used. Just I found out today that our wolf mascot's name is Win. So offering up some encouragement from him to remember to vote on the 4th. And then we also have Marky the Moose, who's another mascot at Rick Marcotte. So there's one for him as well, if people want to use those. And I think that's all of them. So all of those are again available for download. I'll probably be adding a few more in the next few weeks, but those will all live at the same link. So it'll just now be a lot of we'll be posting to our social media. We'll be just trying to get out into the community as much information as possible. And obviously any support from families, from staff, from students would be obviously wonderful. So please reach out to me if you have any questions or want to help in any way.
Thank you so much, Julia.
And I just want to make one note, I do plan, Violet, on attending the rest of the sessions that you have scheduled. My schedule, but compared to other board members, is probably more flexible. So, but again, if there are other board members who want to attend any of those, you're absolutely welcome to. We just need to be careful, I guess, not to have 3 of us show up, because then that becomes a quorum. But I do plan on attending them, just so there is representation from the board at these particular meetings. I also want to just mention, I think it's Sarah Heiss, she was up speaking, and you had mentioned, you know, could somebody attend, you know, if you have a meeting going on or something, could a board member attend or show up? And I will certainly offer myself up for that. Again, my schedule is flexible. I did speak with another parent not too long ago who was potentially organizing sort of a neighborhood forum, and we may not be aware of those and such. So if you do have something going on and would like to extend an invitation and the calendar permits, I'd be happy to attend, or perhaps myself and another board member if they're available. So absolutely. We do try to organize meetings. Sometimes they're well attended, sometimes they're not. So it becomes challenging giving schedules and such.
That's a quick question, just logistics on that. If we wanted to invite someone from the board to a community forum, how would we go about doing that?
You can email us or come to an open meeting and invite us and start a comment. I just got a thought.
I just would clarify that if it is just a single board member showing up or two board members, we typically would be very careful about not speaking for the board, because it is not an official board meeting, but we certainly be willing to share what we can. And we tend to really be careful about differentiating what's our opinion versus what the board represents.
The other thing I think your question brings up a great point, which is that best ways to reach the school board are to come to our community engagement sessions, whether that be listening sessions at the library, or to email us directly. And I would advise emailing the SB school board account as well as each individual board member email, which is listed on our school board page on the website. And I would love to emphasize that I do not check social media accounts related to school board, and I would not advise my fellow members to do that either. And that is not an effective way to have your voice heard. So public meetings, emails directly to the board, community engagement sessions, not social media.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia. So now something I'm really excited about. I would like to welcome my team, our 5 principals, and I'm going to join them. And we are going to stand physically side by side. A lot of chairs. Yeah, there you go. I know, so John Craig, who's our acting, I'll just shift the chairs here. John Craig is our acting high school principal, and he had emailed me saying, you know, I just have to leave at this time to be at the high school. But he worked on the slide deck and is here in spirit and intended to share these. So we'll fill in for him. Let's just shift these around so we can face the audience. I'm gonna pull these little strips so that. There we go. Perfect. Yeah. Come on in and I'll put the microphone. Cheer you. It's like, which I was getting that, but I think typically we are. I think you will ask the kids the audience or something. Anything. As long as I get a mic. All right. In here. The owl over as well. Is that cord long enough? We can switch to the other side. That's easier, so then we'll see the slides too. Here. Starting with me, you know, during this budget process, we have, the central office administrators have, provided budget presentations, and, our principals, felt it important to, now that we no longer have to fulfill the statutory requirements around sharing of financials, so that we get up here and talk about the heart of our schools, which is our students. And so that's what this is. This is a celebrations presentation, and it is us as a team saying, this is why we support the budget, and it's for our kids. And so that's the sentiment of this. So I hope you'll enjoy it. It's certainly the budget presentation that I've been most excited about. So without further ado, we will advance to the first slide. And these are, I don't know what happened to these slides, somehow they turned dark, but they're not, they're light and bright. So, some of the successes of this budget features, really important equity issue is increasing bus drivers. So we know that our kids can't learn when they're not at school. And, we have, expanded the number of bus drivers so that our kids are in school. We know that the students whose parents can't get them to school or who can't take off time from work or who take off work to be with their younger siblings, have missing out. So this is a point of pride. Added additional special education supports, maintained nursing services for students. And we have, moved our multilingual supports, that are required, equity supports into local funding from grant funding, which we understand may no longer be available for fiscal year 26. We've added para-educators to our kindergarten classrooms in order to support that early childhood focus. We know that early literacy and early childhood is when students have the greatest opportunity to acquire literacy skills, which is the single most important skill for success as students matriculate through our system. So maintaining those literacy and math specialists that we added a few years ago, as well as continuing with our structured literacy program. We've restructured departments to try to find as many cost savings as possible, off the back of 3 straight years of significant reductions, beginning with the phasing out of ESSER funds. This has been really difficult, but we've implemented a new financial software, and really tried to scrub budgets and cut line items in order to preserve programming and staffing. So that's been a priority. Leadership reductions, I want to provide some clarity on this. Not only are our administrators incredibly important, and you know, literally could not run our schools without people by my sides, and the rest of our admin team. But I do want to just, point of clarity, the administrators are unionized, and their contract and their negotiated agreement with the board does specify that leadership reductions cannot occur in the absence of a budget fail. So just wanted to provide that information. So there's clarity there. So we have some leadership reductions, here, but really trying to, you know, focus on supporting our schools, given the limited resources that we have associated with the funding changes that are outside of this team's control. So we're here to support kids, and we can advance to the next slide, please, Nick. This one, I apologize if this is hard to see with the change here. So this is your tax rate. It's about 7.93%, which is about a 15.58 increase over last year. And we'll advance to the next slide because after this graph, it's going to be super fun. This is showing our expenses. We're here for people, right? We're here for students and our staff, and most of our budget is to support salaries and benefits. So you see that represented here with that 75% of our salary. And now I have the pleasure of turning the mic over to Gertrude Chamberlain, Principal Holly Ruel.
And before we start that, Melissa has something she wants to read.
Hi.
John Craig was going to be the person to read, but he's off at 8th grade step up tonight. And then Mike Jabor is off at wrestling tonight.
I think I need that mic. You need both. Yeah, y'all can hear me better. This is the in-room mic, and the other one is for the time of the TV.
All right. So you usually see us sitting in the back, working on our newsletters, paying attention, multitasking as usual. And we wanted to get in front of you so that you could see your building leaders, because when we come up here and talk, we usually talk to the board, you see the backs of our heads. So here we are. And we prepared something to read before we talk about some slides. We are ready to get behind a budget that passes on the first try. And we want to really talk to you about why we want to do that. So as building leaders of the South Burlington School District, we are unwavering in our commitment to supporting our students, staff, and the community. This includes our support of the newly approved fiscal year 26 budget. As a team, we confronted fiscal challenges, recognizing the profound impact on our community. We recognize the difficult and painful decisions this process has required, including reductions to valuable staff, programs, and resources that have been integral to the success of our schools. Our focus remains steadfast, passing the board-approved budget that prioritizes the needs of our students, given the constraints, and ensures continued success. Now is the time for all of us to come together and rally behind this budget that will go to vote on March 4th. Mark your calendars. We stand united in this purpose as your building leaders. Together, we will continue to prioritize the well-being of our community and do all we can to help our students thrive. Let's move forward with strength, unity, and a shared commitment to our schools and the future of our community. Thank you. This was from John Craig, our high school acting principal, Suzanne Grunling, our middle school principal, Mike Jabor, director of student activities, Olivia Kane, butcher principal, Liz McDonald, with Marquette Central School principal, and Holly Ruel, our Gertrude Chamberlain principal. Russell Vobra. Holly Russell Vobra. She just got married. You didn't even catch the typo. And now to Holly.
Yeah, so we just want to reiterate that we're here tonight as a unified group to say that we do support this budget. It was exciting to hear Beth read earlier too, that the SBEA is also in support of passing this budget as well. So we're ready to move ahead and have that be our focus. I'm going to pass it to Suzanne.
Good evening. So we wanted to, with our slides, Julia McGuire helped us put together some slides of snapshots of things happening in our schools. And we wanted to take the opportunity to honor the hard work of our staff, the partnership with our families, the students that we are proud of every day, and have our slides be available for our community to interact with, to take it. Nick, if you could just do a slow roll through the slides, that you know, our staff and our families and our students inside and out of our school buildings every day, their energy, their commitment, their creativity, the inspiration that they bring to our community. And so we just want to take a little time for everybody to see that as we go through. And that is just a snippet of a moment in time. And these moment in times happen throughout our day, every day, and they couldn't happen without the dedicated staff every day, the commitment from our community to our schools, our partnerships with our families that do a whole lot of hard work every day, that our students walk through the door ready and engaged for the day, and the creativity that goes into just making school an inspirational place to be. And we want to thank them with our slides. Thank you.
Question, but I don't know how to talk to them.
This one.
I'll sit here. Like, hey, Member of the public, since I don't have a child in the school district, I don't necessarily get the, district-wide information, and I wonder, I haven't seen the city announce why Detilio Drive was named Detilio Drive, and I'm wondering if Greg Marcotte School could present, you know, just a little paragraph or something, or work with the city to announce to the folks who don't have connection to the school district about the name change of the street. Thank you.
Did you want me to answer that a little bit?
Sure.
So, yeah, we presented to the school board, we presented to the city council. Our students, when I say we, I'm saying me and our students, our second, third, fourth, and fifth graders. I believe there was something in the other paper as well, but I can still, be in touch with the city and ask them. They put some things on their website because I know I cleared some pictures for them. But sure, we can talk more about Detilio Drive, our, the street that goes from Market Street to our school parking lot and our school. Our students got together after a year of learning about how to name streets, and they dedicated, they recommended to the city that the street be named Detilio Drive, dedicating the name of the street after our longtime main office assistant, Susan Detilio, who we love very much. So the street sign is up. If you're driving past, you will see it. And we're really proud of the voice and choice of our students working on that year-long project.
If I'm permitted to ask another question, I just wondered if, if some of these amazing, things that you've achieved with the kids, if there's a way to share that with the community more directly, because I really feel like that would be a way to help people care about education and care about educating the kids in our community. I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, for grandparents, for anybody to be able to open something and see, like, this is what the kids are doing at each of your schools, I think would be absolutely fantastic. And definitely a step towards, bringing people in to understand, like, why is it important to support this budget or any of the activities? So, yeah. Thank you very much.
The tricky part is I know that we do send things to the other plate paper and they pick and choose what they decide to put in, so that is a challenge. But I do know that many of us have, weekly newsletters that go out. I've got a couple of parents here, like, we spend a lot of time highlighting the incredible things. We all use a platform called Samore, which Violet also uses to send out to community members. And I know, like, mine is posted on the Chamberlain website every week. So anybody that wants to take that step of going in can look and see, here's what happened at Chamberlain in a week. So that's another good place. You can check out our websites, that's there. And it's tricky. The other paper has limited space. I know Julia does send in quite frequently articles. We do try and reach out to the press, and depending on what's going on in our community, whether, they'll come in and highlight our schools, is up to them as well. But we do control our websites and try and put as many things up as we can.
Samantha Ayers, I am a parent. I have two kiddos at this district, one at GCS and one at Tuttle. I also work in the pre-K program, but Violet, I was just curious if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more. On one of the slides, you were highlighting the addition of paraeducators to kindergarten, and you were talking about the importance of the extra support in those early childhood years. And speaking as a parent who had two kiddos go through our pre-K program, one who was identified as a kid as needing extra support and getting on an IEP. And I think that would have been done much later. Just curious how you're differentiating between, like, adding the money or taking the money away from pre-K and prioritizing kindergarten. Well, kindergarten is really challenging and it's good to have those supports. I'm just kind of curious about your wording specifically around
early ed support and the decisions that were made. Yep, so our next agenda item is dedicated to this, so we'll go into a greater length, but thank you for the question, Samantha. I mean, full disclosure, my first master's is a double in elementary and early childhood education. Me as an individual, I actually have a pre-K student at home right now. You know, we as a district have had to make a ton of really difficult decisions. And this is, you know, the work of no one individual here. You know, across the board, we've heard testimony tonight on folks who all have extremely valid points on painful reductions. I will, because that is our next agenda item, I want to make sure there's opportunity to speak to that more fully. But I thank you for your question, Samantha, and I think we'll continue to take questions on this, I guess, budget generally as well, or the presentations. Folks have any?
Is this an opportunity for public comment on the budget?
I'm gonna defer to the chair. I mean, I'd say we are taking questions on the budget generally, so like, if the chair permits, I'd say, come on down. We've had other questions on the budget, so. Hi, Mark, come on up.
Okay, it's not a question, it's a comment. I was driving the kids to Sleepy Hollow, so I couldn't get there in time for public comment. Yeah, yes, don't start my 3 minutes yet. Right here.
You want me to talk or
You not need to talk. But I didn't think we'd be this close when I read this one earlier.
Oh, come on.
We did, yeah. Which makes it that much harder to read this. My name is Mark Gable. I'm a resident of South Burlington. We bought a home on Burr Parkway in 2001 in part because of the community it was in and its reputation for the best schools in the state of Vermont. We moved to Canada in 2015 and returned 3 years later with a middle schooler and an elementary school and an elementary student. We bought the house across the street, again, because we love this community. And we knew that our kids would go back to Orchard Elementary where they belong. In all those years, I've never once voted against the South Burlington school budget until now. That decision to vote against the budget is not because of the burden it will put on our citizens or our fixed incomes, although I appreciate the burden that it places on them. I don't base that decision on the elimination of what many view as critical services provide to learners who don't fit into a traditional educational model, which the current administration has chosen to cut, specifically the Big Picture program that has been life-changing, if not life-saving, for many students, including our neighbor's daughter, Alan. It is not even because of the 3-year contract that's about to be awarded behind closed doors to our superintendent, who some would suggest was originally placed in that position without proper community involvement or proper search. Same person receiving a $37,000 increase in pay, while other funds were being diverted away from academics and student-specific needs. It's none of those things specifically. It's because the South Burlington School Board continues to lack transparency, honesty, and follow-through. It's because our school board continues to claim to want public input, but ignores concerns from the community, students, teachers, and support staff who are brave enough to come in person and give voice to their concerns. It's because the administration posts with students first, but repeatedly acts in a manner that does not reflect that value. It is because of all of those things. And if I'm honest with myself and with all of you, all the things that I've listed above as well. It's because it's finally time for our community, teachers, support staff, parents, and students to stand up and say enough is enough. Frankly, it's past time. Until the South Burlington School Board and South Burlington administration significantly change the way they do business, I will not support any budget proposed and urge others to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this budget presentation for the administration before you? Okay,
The principals for being here and sharing and all that you do.
So, okay, put another one here. Thank you. Thank you for attention. Here, and then I think we can. Right.
So our next agenda item is the pre-K program information update.
Are you able to, there she is, great. So I'd like to welcome Kristen Romick. She is our Executive Director of Education Support Systems to talk about pre-K information tonight and continue the community conversation. Welcome, Kristen.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to share a little information that I've shared with our pre-K team most recently. Actually, most recently our middle school team and our pre-K team last week. And again, in how we've come to some of the decision making, I think it's really important to note that as everyone has spoken, none of this is easy. We've had to make decisions that are pre-K through 12 decisions. So as an administrative and central office team with support from pre-K leadership, a decision was made to propose cutting 2 teachers from pre-K. The rules and regulations around pre-K are different from those in the elementary grades, and configurations are vastly different from district to district. However, what we do know is that South Burlington has one of the best, if not the best, pre-K program currently, with a classroom teacher, a special educator, a speech and language pathologist, and a paraeducator in each of the 3 classrooms. Additionally, we have a special educator and a speech and language pathologist committed to our pre-K outreach. This program was something that my predecessor worked really hard to develop. However, with the knowledge that we as a district were going to need to propose deep cuts, we had to look pre-K through 12, and it hasn't been an easy decision. So with that said, we will need to restructure our pre-K, and final decisions around what it will look like won't be decided until we have a budget. Excuse me. We're committed to working together to develop a pre-K that will continue to meet the needs of our youngest learners while still working with a budget that requires cuts. Legally, we're required to have 2 adults to support our license number, but that doesn't include students who require a higher level of adult support based on their special education and service needs. I just want to make sure that folks are clear on that. So we'll need to make IEP team decisions in regards to our students. Additionally, other districts are also interested in ways to support our youngest learners, while also being in the same position we are to make hard decisions regarding budgets. I will be working closely with them on working on those what that will look like across the other districts as well. One of the questions that came to me was, will we look exactly like other districts? And we won't. We'll be working within the regulations, and we'll be working with the needs of our students. And that's just a quick update for you all.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thanks.
Any questions? What I'm hearing, I think a really prevalent public comment that I've heard on this is that the district would be out of compliance. And what I'm hearing from you is that we will not be out of compliance and what our pre-K needs are.
We will not be out of compliance at this time, and there isn't any intention of being out of compliance. I think the concern is that we have increased needs of students with intensive special needs, and as you heard from some of our pre-K educators, we have students who have pretty intensive needs, and it's going to be important that we continue to look at those on a case-by-case basis and ensure that we're meeting their educational plans. Or their individual educational plans. And so there isn't any intent to be out of compliance. We're being incredibly mindful of that while also having to make budget cuts pre-K through 12. And so, and in regards to restructuring, until we had a budget on what that looked like, it's hard to restructure and have that conversation. Now that we know what we're working with, and hopefully with a budget that will pass, we can work together to come up with what that will look like. And folks have some great ideas that they'll be sharing at the table. So again, it's not easy. It's super hard. I appreciate the advocacy and the support, and want folks to understand that I too understand that this is really challenging work, really challenging.
Any more comments or questions?
I want to clarify that being in compliance is not taking into account that we have a very high number of children who do have special needs. And I hear Kristen saying that we're not gonna, count those in our numbers or whatever, but we're also not saying we're gonna give these children interventionists. So as at this point, unless we're gonna add in extra support for these children to access their communication devices, be catheterized twice a day, have their social emotional needs met when they're experiencing severe trauma, having their speech and language needs met, having their academics needs met, with 2 adults in the classroom and somebody coming in and out, there's no way that we're ever going to be able to meet the needs of many children who cannot function on their own. You would never say to a kindergarten teacher, hey, you got 2 people in here. Here's 5 kids that can't speak, walk, feed themselves, or be safe in a classroom, and say, oh, we're in compliance. It's just, it blows my mind as somebody who teaches at UVM, teaches the people who are going to be in your school district teaching, hopefully someday, has been here for 20 years, has to sit there and look at a program and say, gee, I used to give the kids good programs. Here we are now. That kid can't get what he needs. That kid can't get what he needs, and that kid doesn't get what he needs. It's mind blowing to me that we would ever take away from, if you think about South Burlington as a business, which sometimes I feel like it is, why would you not front load your investment to be able to save on the other end? It doesn't, it's just bad business. And if I was a parent here, I would be concerned about my heavily special, if I had a child with special needs that required all these supports and they're not happening, I would be so concerned. And I did speak, and I appreciate that there is a budget constraint, and I understand that, but I don't understand how people who have not actually been in this program and seeing what these kids are doing, or we're doing, or in the community are doing, can sit here and make decisions about things. I don't care if you have a degree in early childhood, or you have a child like who's a baby and is in early childhood. Unless you come and spend 20 years in this community, in the pre-K community, and seeing the needs, you cannot be making decisions. And I want to know who we're talking to in other districts, because when we speak with other districts, and it is a small community, let me tell you, we know every early childhood educator. And when they hear what we're doing in South Burlington, they're appalled. And also, I'm gonna say, like, I think that it's embarrassing right now what our pre-K is gonna look like. And, I just hope that we can make it work. I hope we don't lose more really wonderful staff because they don't want to work here anymore. And I just hope that you guys can really take it to heart. And I want one of you, or all of you, or some of you, to contact me and say, Kara, can I come with you during the day? Or can I come in a classroom? Because I don't think you understand until you see it. I don't claim to know what was happening in Tina's class in kindergarten. I'm not in there all the time. I don't go to Cindy's services and say, oh, I know what Cindy's doing because I've heard about it. I would never do that. I go in.
Kara,
happening.
we're at about time. Thank you. I appreciate it. Kara, would you mind just stating your name just for the record again, so we have that?
Kara McDonough.
Thank you, Kara.
So I'm wondering if there was any sort of conversation about hiring interventionists in pre-K. It has to happen. We have at least 4 children who need interventionists. You're cutting 2 teachers, hiring 4 interventionists. Were these conversations had? Has the budget, like, is there any money allocated towards these individuals that have to be hired?
Do you
Do you want me
Yeah,
to answer?
so-
Yeah, sorry.
Lauren, that's okay. If you could hear me.
Did you want me to go ahead?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. It's hard on Zoom. I'm not typically on Zoom. So Ariel, in answer to your question, part of what we've talked about as a group is that we're going to be working on what pre-K is going to be looking like in February. And if students have needs that require any student who has a need in particular for their IEP, those are areas we're going to be looking at. Again, our idea isn't to not serve our students. Our plan is to serve our students, and I hear what you're saying, and I hear the concerns that you have. And going forward, those are the conversations that we now are going to be able to have. But I don't anticipate not serving our students. Our goal is obviously to ensure that we're serving all of our students. And I am aware of the students who have intensive needs. And so we'll continue to have that conversation. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to have specific IEP, conversations in this meeting, but in regards to, has that been a consideration? It absolutely has been a consideration. And we do know, as we do every year, that we have to hire staff to support our IEP needs.
So there are 3 interventionists added in the budget. And we're struggling to hire special educators, para-educators, and interventionists. That's us. It's a problem across the state. And so there are 3 in the budget, and IEPs drive one-on-one interventionist staffing. So whenever there's a student who requires, say, a one-on-one interventionist, that's something by law the district has to provide.
Any other questions or comments? That concludes our superintendent's report. Next, we have a brief recess with like 5 or 10 minutes. So we are going to take a brief recess and then we'll reconvene at 7:50. Agenda item 8, action items. First, we have our FY26 public high school choice capacity, Title 16, Section 822A. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the overview and the recommendation from the administration regarding the FY26 public high school choice capacity?
Yes.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation that the FY26 school choice capacity should be 1?
So moved.
And moved, do I have a second? Second. Laura seconds, any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have appoint Suzanne Renling from FHT, middle school principal, as our truancy officer for the remainder of FY 2025. Does the board have any questions about this? And pull up an email just citing the statute of this, if you'd like.
While you're doing that, I can say Suzanne has a wealth of experience in this area. She was the truancy officer at the Essex Westford School District. She has a lot of experience in leading professional development to reduce chronic absenteeism. And we know that when our students are not in schools, they can't learn. So this is critically important. And she also served for 5 years on the Chittenden County Chronicle Absenteeism Council. So she's got a lot of knowledge in this area, and appreciate you supporting here, Suzanne. Thank you.
So the statute stipulates that a school board shall annually appoint 1 or more truant officers and record their appointments with the clerk of the school district on or before July 3rd. State police, sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, constables, and police officers shall be truant officers ex officio. Does that mean anything in that sense? Of a school truant officer? It doesn't matter. That is what the statute says. Do I have a motion to approve Suzanne Gwendolyn as our truant officer for the rest of FY25?
So
Chris moves. Do I have a second?
second,
Seconds, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, so our next action item is to ratify and confirm the school board chair's execution of the extension of the superintendent's employment contract as per its terms and conditions. As the only school board member who was on the board at the time that the superintendent was hired, I plan to do most of the talking on this action item. And my objective is to address the concerns, address all of the concerns that I've heard, answer the questions, and also invite other board members to share their perspectives on this issue. And I have a lot, so please bear with me. There's a lot of feedback to respond to, and I have a lot to share. And my thoughts on this matter are, I'm gonna do my best to have it be cohesive, but a lot of the issues interconnect. So I'm gonna do my best to address all of them. So different questions or assertions, comments that I've heard, and I'm just gonna list them all out so that if you feel like your feedback has not been represented, you have the opportunity to add. I wish that more people who had commented were able to stay, but I'm also hoping to summarize all of the points that I'm about to share into a written document to share with our community. So the questions or comments to address: how will you gather and include stakeholder feedback from the district, school, and community level as part of this review? How will the board ensure the process is transparent, fair, and inclusive? The board has, this is a comment, the board has already decided to renew the superintendent's contract without a clear, transparent process. The community was not, this is another comment, the community was not informed or involved in any meaningful way regarding this decision. What is the current status of the superintendent's contract review? Has a decision been made, and if so, what process was followed to arrive at it? How can the increases to the superintendent's salary be justified? How and who did the board gather necessary information and data from to respond to the above? Did they survey or hold meetings with district employees? Was feedback requested from parents, guardians, and the community regarding the superintendent's and district's performance? Was academic performance, financial data, or other measurables provided and reviewed? Did building administrators provide feedback on the effectiveness of the superintendent's leadership? I also want to address the NEA listening tour. I want to address the contract process and how it relates to open meeting law. I tried to make a comment of somebody who read, and I think it will be addressed, but the way that they worded it, I wish I could remember exactly what it said. It's helpful. Anyway, policy, governance, trainings, and accessibility to the board work. What is the real perspective of the superintendent's job? Pre-K info session at a board meeting and how that's shared with district staff, the big picture program, and the superintendent search. So these are all things that I'm going to attempt to address. So I would like to start by saying that I think a lot of these questions and concerns at the root of it is a lack of understanding of our governance model, which is policy governance. And I cannot think of a more important time for an elected body to follow the agreements and the policies that they committed to, the governance model. Not to do so is to represent individual interests and to break the contract that we have with our community about how we will operate. So I want to start by reading from this book called Getting Started with Policy Governance, and it's written by Caroline Oliver, and it is endorsed by John Carver, who's the creator of the policy governance model. I am allowed to share portions of this book for educational purposes, so I'm not violating any copyright law to the best of my knowledge. Policy governance is touted amongst government model experts as the single most influential model of governance in the world. And one of the benefits of policy governance is it so clearly delineates whose role is what responsibility and creates a framework for a large community with varying opinions and values about the best way to do something. It seeks to make that very clear as to whose role is what, so that things can't get missed or not addressed properly based on the governmental framework. So in chapter 7 of this book, we have CEO evaluation. There's a section, and in policy governance, the CEO would in our governments would be our superintendent. The two areas of monitoring that we have looked at so far, ends and executive limitations, provide the basic information that the board needs to evaluate the CEO, in this case, our superintendent. Thus, using policy governance, annual superintendent evaluation becomes simply a matter of summarizing the results of the previous year's monitoring. As we have seen, non-compliance does not necessarily mean fault, so the board needs to review the conclusions of its monitoring report assessments rather than the superintendent's compliance conclusions. Under policy governance, superintendent evaluation becomes a short process based on clear criteria, a marked contrast with the long and torturous process that most superintendents or CEOs must endure. Boards that are used to other kinds of superintendent evaluations may get dragged off task by people who try to introduce evaluation criteria that have not been expressed in the board's policies. Certainly, the board can agree to discuss any additional concerns for future inclusion in policy, but to assess the superintendent against unstated criteria would be to break the social contract between the board and the superintendent. So with that in mind, I go to our policy governance. This is our school board policies that were originally adopted in 2009. And this is the board's commitment to our community about how we will govern the school board and achieve the ends of our community. In 3.0, board management delegation, the global statement of this section is the board's sole official connection to the operational organization, its achievements, and its conduct will be through the superintendent of schools. So to interpret that further, the board is responsible to addressing community concerns, and its sole connection to the school district is the superintendent of schools. It would be inappropriate for the school board to be interviewing staff or parents or community members because that is not our governance model. Further, 3.4, monitoring superintendent performance. Systematic and rigorous monitoring of superintendent job performance will be solely against the expected superintendent job outputs, organizational accomplishment of board policies on ends, and organizational operation within the boundaries established in board policies on executive limitations. Accordingly, monitoring is simply to determine the degree to which board policies are being met. Information that does not do this will not be considered to be monitoring information. So I would like to then go to our superintendent contract, the one that has already been approved, and I don't mean 25 to 28, I mean 22 to 25. And this contract in many ways is almost a carbon copy to the predecessor, Mr. Young's contract, with very small changes. So I would like to read out section 4B of the contract that discusses performance evaluation. So performance goals for each fiscal year shall be mutually set by the school board and Nichols no later than October 15th of that fiscal year. By May 15th of each such fiscal year, the board shall complete a performance evaluation of Nichols. The evaluation process shall include a meeting with Nichols prior to May 15th. As part of the evaluation process, Nichols shall have the right to present written materials to the board regarding her performance with respect to the established performance goals. And then the rest of the section goes on to delineate how performance pay would be awarded based on the board's findings of how well the performance goals have been met. I share all of this to first ground the community in what the school board's task is in terms of evaluating our superintendent. The community would not be well served by evaluating the superintendent based on how popular her decisions are. This superintendent has had incredible messes to clean up, and often cleaning up messes require decisions that are not popular. I'd like to illustrate why this evaluation as a function of our government model is beneficial to our ends and to our community. Last spring, Superintendent Nichols notified the school board that she was officially making a recommendation to non-renew the probationary contract of an administrator. Under policy governance, it is the CEO, aka superintendent's role to make employment action decisions. However, the school board is the final arbiter of employee contracts. The public optics of this decision could not have tested the integrity of our superintendent more. Accusations that this employment action was due to the fact that the administrator being non-renewed was the direct supervisor of the partner of the school board chair, that's me. Ms. Nichols and the school board are bound by policy and employment law not to disclose personnel matters, including the details of the decision to non-renew. The other parties engaged in this matter, by contrast, are free to share as much or as little information as they would like, thereby controlling the majority of the narrative. The superintendent's recommendation was unanimously upheld by the board. Following a request from the administrator to be heard by the board in executive session, as well as a recusal by me, a new board member present. So what I'm trying to describe is the decision to non-renew was unanimously upheld by the board that included me. The administrator who was not being renewed requested the opportunity to be heard by the board in executive session and has that right. The administrator met with a different board, and what I mean by different is I recused in that executive session, and we had the replacement of a new board member. So this is in essential, like two different constitutions of boards. The second formation of the board that did not include me had the opportunity to hear from the administrator who was not renewed to address all of the concerns that were related to the employment action. And they unanimously upheld the decision to non-renew. If the board included community feedback in her performance evaluation, it would be incentive for the superintendent to make employment decisions that are popular instead of decisions that are required and morally correct by policy. Through this round of public comment, what's clicking for me is that policy governance and how to use it is not well understood by our community, and often it's not well understood by board members. Our school board is a reflection of our community, and with the lens that public governance is not well understood at large, I now recognize criticisms of the superintendent that used to baffle me as indications that the board has much work to do in proactively and efficiently communicating with our constituents. All of the feedback that I've heard about transparency up until, I would say, a week ago, I have been completely confused by, because from my view, all of the questions and concerns that community members have are adequately addressed in the presentations that the board hears in our open meetings. And I've been thinking a lot about why is it that the community has this feedback for our superintendent when I can so clearly see the answers that she's providing, and I think that they're reasonable. And I realized that the chain of command and communication is muddled. The community at large is not clear about who's responsible for what. I'm proud of what I have accomplished as board chair in less than a year. When I accepted the responsibility less than a year ago, I had two main goals for my first year as board chair. First, to foster a positive board work environment where board members felt supported to get their questions answered and encouraged to share differing viewpoints. From my perspective, a board that unanimously agrees on every topic is not a good reflection of our community, where opinions and values vary widely. My second goal was to offer predictability and stability to our superintendent, who in less than 3 years into her employment here has partnered with 4 different board chairs. When I accepted the responsibility, I promised my fellow board members that I would be open to feedback and welcome questions for different opinions and perspectives, and committed to them that if they saw a need for change, that I would support that change. Having served as a board member who had experienced board leadership that loved the power of the seat more than the responsibility of the job. I share all of this to say that I am proud of this team and I'm proud of what we've managed to accomplish, but I also think that I have not, as the spokesperson of the board, effectively communicated with our community and not proactively either. And that we have work to do. I would like to point out that I've spent a significant portion of my board chair time in the last year onboarding 3 new members. And I've stuck by and continued to do the work even when it gets hard. And I think that if our community is to be served by a board that is being transparent and proactive and efficient with communications, we need a board that retains that team for a long period of time so that board members can be trained and learn about policy governance and answer these questions in a well-informed way. I spend most of my time trying to support my fellow board members to understand how they can achieve the things that they're trying to achieve. And a way that we have, in my opinion, disturbed our superintendent is by not sharing widely from the board perspective the accomplishments of the ends that we have achieved. And I think that due to the newness of many of our board members, when community members tune into our board meetings, they usually are seeing board members who are learning what sorts of questions need to be asked of our administration in real time. And I can understand how that wouldn't create a lot of confidence that the board knows what questions to ask. But I think that more often than not, what's actually happening is board members are asking, like they're reviewing the information ahead of time and getting their questions answered. And then we're not kind of going through the process of re-asking those questions in open session where community members can hear them. I also think sometimes community members raise concerns. And frequently, in my effort to maintain our governance model, I direct their concern back to the superintendent and she directly answers them. The board is privy to all of Superintendent Nichols' community communications, except where privacy of students or staff is necessary. And I cannot think of a single community concern or the request that has gone unanswered. And I want to be clear, unanswered doesn't mean that the person who got an answer from Superintendent Nichols was pleased with the answer, but an answer was given nonetheless. I'd like to say that in my current capacity as board chair, I have spent so much time trying to offer stability to our superintendent, and I think that at this time, it's clear that the school board has not well served our superintendent in her role. I think she's being unfairly blamed for decisions and feedback that are not, it makes it seem as though it's her fault. What I also would like to comment on is that the superintendent's evaluation is, and I'm going to go through the document that we do for the formal evaluation annually. But is constantly monitored through policy monitoring. We have a schedule that we follow where our policies are monitored. We have a policy that we monitor almost monthly. That is the opportunity for the board and in collaboration with the community to make sure that our ends are actually being met, to fact check, to review the data, ask the questions, get them answered, and ask what the plan is if it's insufficient. That is the metrics by which our superintendent is evaluated. And to evaluate her based on the temperature of the climate at the time is not our board policy, it's not our governance model, and it would set our community up for failure. So to the questions, how will you gather and include stakeholder feedback? Or did you interview staff? Are you going to go into schools and see how things are actually working? That's not the governance model. No, it would be completely inappropriate for board members to just to go to campus and interview staff about how they feel. I'm going to share my screen for a moment so that I can show you the official performance evaluation form that we used this year and that we've used in previous years, and is my understanding that we've used and it's my understanding this is a form that's been used in the district for a long time. So each board member is given this form and they're to put their name and the date, and the chair is responsible for giving these forms to board members I would say 2 weeks ahead of when it's due would be reasonable. But the board members are certainly at liberty to request more time, but this is the form that is used. So there's directions, and then it collects quantitative and qualitative data. So what happens is, I'll just speak from my experience since I chaired this for the last evaluation. I gave this form to each of my board members and they submitted it back to me, and I was able to take the scores from 1 to 5 and make one average number that is the board's reflected qualitative analysis on how the board, the superintendent has performed. And then I went through and copied and pasted all of the comments that board members made into one cohesive document that went section by section and redacted any identifying information if necessary, although I don't believe it was. This document is shared with our superintendent, but it's also shared with the full board so that there's transparency between board chair and board members to make sure that board members' comments were completely inclusive of what they said, since I'm the one who's preparing it. And part of the reason for that is so that board members aren't necessarily influenced by what their other board members are saying on the evaluation. So it seeks information about board communication, vision for the district, leadership, strategy, management, communications, and state and federal regulations in terms of compliance. And to those ends, this is board members' experiences observing our superintendent at work, whether that's responding to community concerns or how effectively she seeks to communicate with our community about any concerns, not just budget. There's also a place where board members can suggest performance goals that they would like the superintendent to consider. And there is space here for additional comments if board members have additional comments that they would like to make. So once all board members have completed this evaluation, and it's compiled into one document, it's shared with Superintendent Nichols, and then the board and Superintendent Nichols have the opportunity to meet in an executive session where we can go over all of this information. I think another place where at times transparency in my role as a leader on the board hasn't been adequately addressed is that I'm still learning where the line is between protected and privileged information, and I err on the side of caution because once something is shared or said, it can't be taken back. But I really see all of these comments that we've heard and that we've been gathering as feedback for the board and feedback for how the board has communicated with our community about our superintendent's performance. In thinking about like the pre-K programming information, and saying like the staff wasn't informed that this would be updated at the school board. The school board meeting is not where staff should expect to get updates about their programming. They should expect to get those updates from their building-based leadership, not from the school board meeting. And thinking about the frustrations that we heard from Kara, I think what she's actually getting at is, are compliance standards actually good enough and quality enough for what our students deserve? Because the school board is obligated to stop at compliance. And what we hear is our community cares about the quality of our programming and our education, but that's a bigger conversation than the school board or the superintendent. That's education policy. That's not to say that I don't understand the frustration and the passion, and that is where we are absolutely united. I think there's just confusion about where all of this energy and passion should be placed. I'm just going to take a minute to review my notes and make sure that I've covered all of the points that I was hoping to make. In terms of the NEA listening tour, the union is absolutely at liberty to do something like that and should. But I believe that listening tour kicked off after the non-renewal of the administrator that I just cited as an example of why policy governance is efficient. And I would also like to say that in an effort to try to communicate to our staff from the board level, which is highly irregular communication, but was my effort to let staff know that the board is listening to their concerns. the email communication from the SBA, EA co-presidents, was derogatory toward the superintendent and will certainly impact listening to our responses. We would be concerned about the validity of data being presented during a budget crisis after communication like this. We are also aware that listening towards, this is what I've written in response to the SBA, and I'm just trying to organize all my thoughts. So that's why I'm bouncing between candid, free-flowing language and more prepared language. We are also aware that listening tours were conducted at Orchard after a principal was placed on leave and at FHT as a direct response to staff concerns over the non-renewal of a principal. A decision which two different constitutions of school board members supported unanimously following the review of evidence in executive session. Due to these factors, the validity and process of the listening tours should be heavily scrutinized. So in terms of the contract and open meeting law, contract negotiations are always done in executive session, and the contract terms were settled in November. And we are obligated by statute to publicly ratify that contract prior to the contract taking effect. So between the contract being executed in executive session and the open ratification in the public process, that just needs to take place before the contract would take effect, which is July 1st, 2025. So there are no open meeting law violations in that sense. I've heard much from the community about reducing administrators, and this year our central office has seen more administrators and executive assistants on leave than I think has happened in a long time. And one of the most valuable members of the team, I would say, is our executive assistant, or I shouldn't say most valuable, that's not fair, but most valuable to the board. Is our executive assistant, Delana Gilroy, who has this institutional knowledge. She served the district for 38 years. And I will frequently check with her about bureaucratic process, because like many community members and any community member who might like to join the board, I'm not an expert in policy governance and I'm not an expert in open meeting law or the statutes, but I am responsible for following them, which means I'm responsible for seeking guidance about the appropriate way to do things. I will systematically check that the things that we're doing are in compliance, and I did not have an opportunity to check with any of the mentorship in terms of when I needed to put this ratification on a warrant agenda. But it's not following open meeting law, and I feel confident that it so happens that trying to answer a reporter's question is what helped me to uncover that we needed to ratify it in open session sooner, but there's no like violation of open meeting law. I would also like to address the assertion that the superintendent's salary is not, the increases are not justified. I have not heard any suggestion from the administration or otherwise that any group in the district whatsoever should be considering a pay freeze. So I don't know why that would apply to the leader of the district, who is responsible for every action that takes place in our district and is the face of all of the district operations and accomplishments. I don't believe that how much money you make should be indicative of how hard you work, because I think that all of our district staff work very hard. I believe that the money that you make indicates your relation to power and responsibility. And if any teacher in our district violates any sort of, I'm trying to think of an example, but that teacher is responsible for themselves and themselves only. Anything that goes on in our district, our superintendent's license is on the line, and she is the person where the buck is supposed to stop with. And that is an enormous amount of responsibility. Not to mention the harsh public scrutiny that I feel is the result of a board that is not well practiced at communicating with our community and does have actionable space to improve. I also think that the perception of what the superintendent's job is not accurate. Violet Nichols has answered absolutely every text, call, or email from me in a timely manner. I have 2 kids, I own and operate a small business, and I am often doing board work at early morning hours or the late morning hours. And frequently, if I send something to Violet, I'll get a response right away. I would also like to point out that if any of our employees were experiencing an unsafe working environment, Violet is the one who's responsible for responding to that and making sure that that's addressed in a timely manner by the legal requirements that are necessary. But what happens when our superintendent's working environment is unsafe? Who is responsible for rectifying that? Superintendent Nichols was literally placed under protective orders and had to temporarily relocate her family in response to a disgruntled community member. And I literally had to email the governor to get this matter resolved in a timely fashion. This is not an easy job, and it's the perception that it is it's not okay with me because it's not an easy job. She's available all the time. I just sent her an email at like 5 a.m. yesterday morning and she got right back to me. I can't think of how someone could possibly work harder at.
No, I mean, yeah, let's just leave that.
Could demonstrate more willingness to do the work. So that's my first attempt to try to give a real idea of, or a broader perspective of the responsibilities that the superintendent is responsible for. I also would like to say that I frequently have come by central office, and so many of our central office team are here for 12 and 14-hour days. Their time is not protected by union agreements, and they work incredibly hard to try to provide accurate and helpful information. And frequently, the community has questions, public records requests, or is seeking information, and our central office team is tasked with all of the responsibilities that they have to do, and also addressing the request from the community in a timely manner. So I hope that helps. I would now like to highlight some of the organizational achievements that have come about as a result of the hard work of our superintendent. I sat in a board meeting where community raised concerns about the learning conditions and school safety around needing to have windows open to keep classrooms from being too hot, and they were still too hot even with the windows open. And our superintendent has made sure that heat pumps have been installed in those schools, so now the learning environment and learning conditions are hospitable and improves school safety. Received the refugee grant and adhered to multilingual liaisons. We've been featured in the New York Times for e-buses, and Superintendent Nichols has competitively gone after grant funding and funding from the EPA to help fund our e-buses, which is also a climate friendly mission. She'll be featured in Business View magazine and has completed the Harvard course, Harvard Business School's Leading Change course. She's contracted with Abundant Sun to continue work in our anti-racist training. Digitized time and attendance systems for employees. We're fully compliant with Act 29, which relates to school safety. Safety improvements in schools have been updated, like new badge scanners and change safety protocols. A Literacy Curriculum Act, Act 139. She's brought the district into compliance with that. For a long time, we were hearing about transportation modes that were a real issue, and as our superintendent has hired an operations manager and a dispatcher. There's a side letter to increase pay for bus drivers to be the highest in the state. Advertising efforts reinstated routes, so our transportation department has much improved. Previously, we have 5 schools on 4 campuses, and we had 4 schools that did not have school zones. We have school zones implemented now. Just this year, she implemented cell phone restrictions K through 12 to try to improve student outcomes. These are just things that have been accomplished within the last year. When she started, one of the biggest heavy lifts that she did was to address enrollment concerns and overcrowding in the elementary schools. ZEMS from bidding and permitting all the way to completion was a project directed and carefully managed by our superintendent to address those enrollment concerns, and she got impact fees off the ground to pay for 91% of the ZEMS. This is just a few of the things that our superintendent has accomplished in less than 3 years. I have a lot more things, but for the sake of not being redundant, perhaps I can include them in my written summary to the community. My effort here is to address the concerns that I've heard and interpret them. And I do see actionable space where the board can improve communications with the community. That feedback is really well taken and well received. And we do have openings on the school board, and we need people who are passionate about serving our community and not their individual interests, passionate about understanding what policy governance is and helping us with our learning. We've heard some incredible recommendations from community members, and I would really love for community members to join us on this team. And what I see as the most important thing for our district to thrive as a whole is a consistent school board, so that the superintendent and the school board can partner together for all stakeholders at large. I think for now, that is my response to the concerns that I've heard around this action item and my effort to commit to better board communication. I need more community feedback about what sorts of communications are useful. Because up until this point, I have felt like the board is responding to community feedback in a timely manner, but clearly that is not the case. If you have ideas, or if you know you could do it better, please run for the school board. At this time, I'd like to invite any of my fellow board members to share their comments or feedback relating to this action item.
I'd be happy to speak. I actually have a statement. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll turn this on. It kind of blends the budget discussion in, I think, with what you said, Chelsea. So if you are okay, I'd like to read this. Okay. So just for everybody's understanding, this sort of blends in the whole budget discussion along with what we've just heard from Chelsea. So we're navigating challenging times as a district, facing significant economic pressures and another difficult budget season. It's natural to feel frustration or anger, especially when cherished positions or programs are impacted. I deeply understand those feelings from listening to board meetings as a community member, serving as a board member for the past year, and as a parent of children in the district. The challenges before us are complex, and there are no simple solutions. Every decision we make is part of a delicate dance and involves disruption. If the budget passes, a result I personally hope for because I believe it strongly supports our students, families, and community members, particularly those already experiencing economic strain, will feel the weight of the decision. We know there are families just getting by, including those with children in our schools who will struggle with the financial ask. Over the past months, we've received and heard heartfelt messages from parents sharing how specific budget cuts in programming and staff would directly impact their children's education and the support they count on. These stories remind us what is at stake, not just numbers, but real students and families. Our staff, dedicated teachers and professionals, face their own uncertainties. They are passionate advocates for our young people. Whether the budget passes or not, many will experience disruptions that will affect their ability to serve our students. For some, this may even mean losing their jobs, a reality that does not go unnoticed or unconsidered. We also recognize the interconnectedness of our budget with those across the state, as we draw from a shared pool of resources. Vermont's communal funding system distributes resources across districts, meaning our budget decisions affect other districts. Likewise, changes in other districts can impact us, creating a shared responsibility to balance the needs of our students with the sustainability of the broader educational community. Over the past 2 years, I've devoted considerable time and energy to understanding the challenges before us. Through this and my time on the board, I've come to recognize how fortunate we are to have Superintendent Nichols leading our district. While it may seem easy to direct frustration toward leadership, I can personally attest that Superintendent Nichols is one of the most caring, compassionate, and committed professionals I have ever worked with. I am proud to serve on the board with her and want to recognize her for the many hours she has given up with her family in support of ours. Our board members too are deeply committed. We are your neighbors, fellow taxpayers, and for many of us, parents of students or former students. We feel the impact of these decisions alongside you. I'm hopeful. I believe in our community's passion and dedication to ensure our district remains one of the best in the state. These are challenging times, but I'm confident we can rise to meet them, united in our commitment to our students and our shared future. Thank you.
Tim. Board members? Yeah.
I don't have anything prepared because it was exam week last week. Anyway, but I have been thinking about this nonstop and I live it too. I am a teacher. So I do understand the public fear and anger in schools. And at the same time, yeah, this has been really difficult. And thank you, Chelsea, for your statement and also about communication. It's one of the things, yeah, I have tried and I've stumbled more than once trying to do listening sessions where no one comes and, so clearly I've done something that's just not working. So I'm definitely open to that, but yeah, so Violet, I do appreciate all the communication. I feel like, yeah, I mean, you and Tim have put together a budget in under like the most like really, really difficult circumstances. So thank you for that. And basically taking the heat. I know it's not easy to sit here and absorb that kind of anger. So it's, even though it's, and I'm not faulting anybody, I get it, it's justified, people are losing jobs, yes, that's a reasonable response. It's still very hard to sit here and trying to make the best decision possible, knowing that it's hurting people that don't want to themselves.
We're so lucky to have you. Thank you for everything you do for the school district. Since I joined the school board, I had an opportunity to see you in action, not just in committee work or like I show up at a coffee and donut and you're yucking it up with everybody, and that's kind of like your superpower is just kind of yucking it up. But being able to see you operationalize that work, I think it's not just talk about it, it's following up and getting the work done. I've been very impressed with the skills that you bring to the school district and the community at large. Oh my goodness, I think about you every time I see some emails. I'm like, oh, this is like, how do you bear that? I would struggle like so. I commend you for that. It's I don't know, just going through what the school district is experiencing and the state and at a national level. It's just like this compounding stack. Our action tonight. I'm very appreciative. So thank you.
Are there any further board discussion at this time?
I'm just gonna say that, because I wasn't part of the board when this executive session took place, that I am gonna abstain from a vote on ratifying the contract. So I don't feel like I have really enough information and it's sort of unfinished business that I wasn't part of the beginning of the business. That I am appreciating the comments about the potential for improvement about communication and Yeah, I guess I'll just say that.
Thank you, Karen. I think that is the space that I would like to see the board most actively look to improve our performance on, in the future. We also need to, I'm just thinking about how I have been trying to prepare as chair to either prepare the next chair for chairing the board of 7, or myself doing the work of becoming the board of 7. And I'm wondering if in a future agenda, the board would like to consider scheduling a retreat where we could do another self-assessment. I know it's usually annual, but I think it's called for sooner. Self-assessment, especially since our board composition has changed since we had our last self-assessment, and identify goals about where we'd like to better our learning in our governance model, but also where we could improve in effectively communicating with our community. I just think that this is all evidence that we have not been effective at communicating with our community in a proactive and efficient and efficacious manner.
Are you thinking of a retreat in the near future? I mean, we have an election coming up and we'll potentially have a different board.
Yeah, no,
So,
I would think maybe after the election, we normally have a work meeting for training purpose. Maybe we could look at having training either be a part of a retreat or I don't know, it's certainly something to discuss, but I think waiting till July to do the next retreat would be way too long.
agreed, especially if there are new board members.
You know, it's right out to the vote in March.
Yes, have that happen sooner.
Okay, any other board comment or discussion of this? Okay, and then I would like to open it up for public comment on this agenda item. We'll start, just for clarity's sake, we'll start within the room and then we'll do online comment after. And if you'd like to comment in your online, please use the raised hand feature. You only monitor the chat for tech issues. Hi, could you please state your name?
Daniel Boyd, President of South Burlington. My comments concern the 3-year contract extension. The superintendent, who had no prior experience as a school superintendent, was hired 2 years ago and immediately paid approximately $5,500 more per year than her predecessor, who had 12 years experience. Now the school board has offered the superintendent a 21% raise, increasing her salary to over $216,000 a year. Contract also has annual raises of 3.5% plus additional 2 to 4%, depending on positive annual performance evaluations. A 21% raise in 1 year while remaining in the same job, plus annual raises that could amount to an additional 15% over 2 years is excessive, especially when the burden falls entirely on the taxpayers. Given the guaranteed raises and adding in the low percentage of 2% on the performance evaluations, the superintendent will be paid approximately $241,000 in the last year of the contract. And if you go by the high, the superintendent will be making over $250,000 a year. Please consider this. In the first year of the contract, the superintendent will be making approximately $50,000 more than the city manager of South Burlington, $40,000 more than the Vermont educational secretary, and only $2,000 less than the governor. And with the first raise of 3.5%, in all likelihood, the superintendent will be making more than the governor. In my opinion, no school superintendent should be making more than the governor based on sheer responsibility of the office. I'm not suggesting we give the governor a raise, I'm suggesting this contract is not fiscally responsible. Educational costs and the burden it places on Vermonters has been a recent news topic. Vermont families are struggling financially to support education with no relief in sight. This board recently submitted its fiscal year 26 budget with a projected tax increase of 8.1% and a 15.76% increase in per pupil spending. Inflation over the last 2 years was 3.1% in 2023 and 2.9% in 2024. This board must start acting responsibly in fiscal matters. We can't keep outpacing inflation without serious consequences. I urge the board to withdraw the superintendent's contract offer and replace it with one that is more in line with current inflation, places less of a burden on the taxpayer. And I'd like to close with the question to the board. What has the superintendent accomplished to warrant this exorbitant increase in salary? And simply doing one's job does not justify this contract. Thank you.
Thank you. No public comment on that. Why don't we move on to the next comment and then we'll come back. I get issues with this all. Can we unmute Brian, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. This is Brian Companion, and I will be very brief. I want to read something that talks about the Vermont standards for a superintendent evaluation, because I believe that you have not complied with it, despite what you've said this evening. The Vermont standards for superintendent evaluations. These are standards based on the Interstate School Leaders Licensure Consortium. God, that's a mouthful. I'm going to skip right down to superintendent evaluation process. The school board evaluates the superintendent. Okay, thumbs up, you did that. The school board solicits input from teachers, staff, and other community members. The school board provides specific examples, a narrative format to explain the rating. I don't believe that has been done. Earlier, Chelsea, you talked about the superintendent's leadership, and I would agree you are all in a position to judge her leadership with the school board. In fact, I went through this process with you in 23. I don't think you can measure that leadership unless you go into the schools. In fact, in 23, we talked about it, and Kate Bailey recommended the VSBA be brought in, but timing did not allow. It's interesting that other boards like Burlington bring in professionals who do this. And I'm not saying that we're looking to find fault, but an evaluation process is to give you the state of the education in South Burlington and also help the superintendent, and as you've said, the board, with issues that may be addressed because the community has concerns. So right now, I don't believe you've complied with state standards on your review. And that is my comment. Thank you for the time.
Brian, can I ask you some clarifying questions?
He's there, I'm on Chelsea. Wait, he's still there. I mean, I think he's there. I didn't mean to just.
Brian,
Hello?
hi, could you clarify what state, like, where is this information that you just read from?
All I did was Google, does Vermont have standards for superintendent evaluations? And it came up. I didn't go to the Agency of Education site because you could get lost in that for weeks. But I, you know what, I am going to call them tomorrow because I would like to know too, but it makes all the sense in the world. And if you look at the process from the VSBA, they do surveys. They get shareholder input. Let's face it, the state of education is best judged by the people on the front lines.
Brian, I'm hoping to actually see what you're reading from, and I'm not clear. Because what I'm saying on is the board policy that was adopted by this board in 2009, the policy governance book that we say we follow and learn from, and the superintendent contract that has been a standard practice in this district for a long time. So I want to consider the feedback that you've shared and the information that you're sharing. But just Googling something that is not standard practice by contract, by policy, or by law, I don't think is appropriate. That
That's
said,
not surprising.
saying. Additionally, I contacted the VSBA to ask them how many districts participate in their VSBA superintendent evaluation. And at the time, out of all the districts in the state, there were 6 that use the VSBA. And there's a cost associated with using their evaluation, which I don't want to overstate, but I think at a minimum was $2,000, which might be money well spent. And I would be interested in hearing that and considering that. But we can't move the goalposts on how we evaluate the superintendent after she's done the work. If that's something we'd like to look to in the future, we need to be discussing it now and incorporating it into a contract negotiation.
I understand all that. Let me just make this statement and then I'll get off. It's impossible for you to gauge the effect of her leadership on the morale, the culture, the educational setting in the schools without talking to those people, surveying them, doing something. And I'll end on that. Good night.
My response to that is not the standard by which the superintendent is evaluated by the school board by our policy governance model. So while I appreciate the feedback that leadership about culture and morale cannot be adequately assessed by the school board, that is not the standard by which the superintendent is evaluated. The superintendent is solely evaluated by her compliance with our executive limitations and her evidence about the organizational achievements by policy. So, could we unmute Christy, please?
Hi. My name is Christy Knoll. Thanks so much for taking my comment. I'm unprepared. I have been listening tonight and fast forwarding a bit through so I could catch up. Unfortunately, bath time, bedtime lines up with public comment. What I mostly wanted to respond to was how disheartened I'm feeling at the idea that the listening tour that's been conducted and is in process across 5 schools is already being named as something that you imagine to be invalid and heavily biased. That listening tour is an opportunity for educators to share honestly and openly their experiences in our schools. And to me, though I hear that that might not be a part of what this particular decision is in regard to, I do think it is important that the board have an understanding of how our teachers are feeling and the general sense of what is happening in our schools. And to me, the listening tour was an opportunity to honestly share. And so hearing your comments tonight, Chelsea, I have to say, was really disheartening. I hope that people can go into that feedback with an open mind and with a desire to hear from staff about their experiences. Thanks so much.
In response to that, I would say that all of the evidence or comments that are found from that should be carefully evaluated by our superintendent so that she can use it as a part of her self-reflection and her leadership. That is, again, I will say, not the standard by which the superintendent's performance is evaluated. And that is our policy governance. And I hear time and again, and I understand where this frustration is coming from. I just have to emphasize that the school board does not evaluate our superintendent based on culture or popular decisions. It's based on deliverables from our policies. I think that if the community at large would like to see a change in that, we need to run for the board and make a case for changing our governance model. Can't think of a more important time in recent history where an elected body needs to follow the policies and the governance model that they're committed to. To change it is to follow personal interest. Great, well, it looks like Christie has raised her hand. Or Christie, I think you have the ability.
I just wanted to be clear that I understood what you were saying about policy and governance. I don't think that negates my prior comment that I think it is disheartening to hear you name that the listening tour data might be seen as invalid or biased. I was solely trying to speak to that portion of your comments and not to the connection to policy and government. Thanks.
Try to see if Cindy is able to share. Cindy posted a question. As for my kids having issues. The question is, can you please ask my questions as to the total compensation package, including retirement? Also, can the board consider an alternative to a one-year contract instead? Given that I tried to address the contract percentages from Birch Forum recently, and there are so many percentages floating around, I don't want to misspeak. And I haven't asked Superintendent DeVos to have anyone prepared to speak on the percentages of the contract. I'm happy to pull up the contract and read it. If that would address the questions.
Are we talking about her current contract or the one we're about to ratify? Or we're going to take a vote on to ratify?
I would assume the contract that we're about to take a vote on ratifying.
Should we vote first to, I guess, just from a process perspective? Is that public at this point without ratification, or should we vote first? And if it isn't ratified, there shouldn't be something we still share.
I think because it's executed, it can now be shared with the public prior to ratification.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. She says, how about both? Cindy, can you clarify exactly what information you'd like for us to address? Your questions as to the total compensation package, including retirement. I'm not sure what your question about total compensation is. Question is, what is her current wage, any raises for the new contract, and what her retirement package is? So her current wage for 24-25 base pay is $209,365.95. The new contract has language that alters her performance pay from 3% to a range of 2 to 4% and reduces her base increase from 5% to 3.5%. And pull up the contract.
Read that last part.
Sure. So for your 24-25 base pay, $209,365.95. The proposed increase for FY26 is to $216,693, which includes language that alters performance pay from 3% to a range of 2 to 4%, and language that reduces base increase from 5% to 3.5%.
So reduction. Thank you.
There another question, Chelsea, or?
I'm trying to answer the questions it's asked. I just
Oh,
pull up the contracts up so that the information that I share is correct.
Okay.
So current wage, any raises so the raises for the new contract are 3.5% annually. And retirement package. I'm not sure exactly which aspects of retirement you'd like to know about, but. And relevant sections of the contract to share. And then contributions to the district's 403B equal to 80% of Nichols' then effective annual salary, taking into account all performance adjustments and cost of living adjustments to date. That was the proposed contract that we would be seeking to ratify this evening. Does that answer the questions that you asked? Is there more that you'd like me to read?
I would just suggest that she could follow up with email too. You know,
Any other comment?
Just like to clarify something. I based my numbers on the only contract I could find, which was the original contract when she was hired.
could you
at
state your
100
name again?
I'm sorry, Daniel Boyer.
Thank you.
My numbers are based on the only contract I could find, which was the original contract of $179,000. I didn't realize that it already received $30,000 raise in 2 years. And is that correct?
No, $30,000 raise in 2 years.
Well, if what I found was correct, and it was hired, the superintendent was hired at $179,000, and you just stated this year, the salary is $209,000. It's $30,000 raise already in 2 years.
Correct.
Right, so my 21% increase is wrong, but I mean, where do you draw the line? 30,000 in 2 years and now another raise, and with built-in raises, it's. But my numbers aren't wrong with the annual raises and the performance raises. The salary has the potential to be over $250,000 at the end of it, and that's. Giving money out like this is not sustainable. But I apologize for having the wrong numbers, like I said. All I could find online was the original contract, which stated $179,000. I didn't realize that. There had already been a substantial increase to that.
So I guess my justification of where we draw the line is it is in line with CPI inflation.
I'm sorry?
It is in line with CPI inflation. It is market rate for this job description. We have to stay competitive in the market. If the community is wanting to attract high quality professionals to this role, we have to pay for the role. It's in line with market. It is in line with, if you put this into a CPI inflation calculator, which I would encourage you to do, you would see that it is consistent.
What the current offer is, possibly, but not than the $30,000 increase over the last 2 years. I don't think that's. Again, the line has to be drawn somewhere,
Absolutely. So,
because the taxpayers are on the hook for all of it.
let's see if I can share my screen.
Looking for motion, Chelsea or not?
Okay. Saying for the record, she's a South Burlington resident with 2 children going through the schools from K through 12. Can the board consider only a 1-year contract while you consider comments from the community regarding research? So I'm going to go back to the CPI inflation, and then I will come back and answer your question. Thank you for clarifying for the record. So this is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI inflation calculator. Our predecessor in 2009's wages were 173 over 98 for the first year of his last contract. So that would be 2019. 2019. And I believe December of 2024 is as current as we can go, even though it's January 2025. So that would be 213, which the proposed first year would be 216 of the contract that we have. If we change this to January 217, which is the numbers that I cited initially. So this is the evidence of the CPI inflation and how we are staying competitive within the market. Any board member have questions about this or? So to get back to Cindy's question, can the board consider a 1-year contract? I would be interested in what the board has to say. I would say no, because that would not be fair to the negotiations that have already been. Other board members about the different.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think we've negotiated a 3-year and it would be inappropriate to back away from that.
I support that. It just, when you ask, are there any questions? We've kind of talked about this, internally, for me, I don't have any questions because I've had time to process this, it's kind of old news. I don't have any new questions because I've already got there. I appreciate the gentleman I'm seeing in the back, it's just it's fair feedback. It's just we did go through an evaluation process, so this received a lot of critical thought. I hear it. And the frustration of you gotta stop somewhere. Personally, very lucky to have the level of executive skill sets that's brought to the largest district or one of the largest districts in the state. A lot of employees, a lot of students. It's having an opportunity to work with other executive level folks, both in for-profit finance and nonprofit, both in government level. We're very lucky, so.
I would vote for the. This is what we negotiated, and if we want to pay the money to the VSBA to do the evaluation next time, then we can do that. I'm in agreement.
I would like to continue taking all the public comment that there has before we see the motion. Could we unmute Jen Lawrence, please?
Hello, I hope you can still hear me. Just in regards to superintendent salaries, I mean, I would echo again what I'm hearing in the room in regards to some concern just with the salary that's being presented. And there's a lot of information, again, just online looking, you know, there's salaries as high as 163,000, as you know, depending upon where they are. The average is around 153,000. So I think the point being that, you know, when the superintendent came in and had a starting salary that was, you know, 5,000 above the prior superintendent, starting at a level that was above that, is a little bit questionable. You know, in business, that's typically not what we would do. If in other lines of work, if we were hiring someone, you know, you want to bring them in and make sure that they can do the job, and then their increases are commensurate with that. But I did also take kind of had a surprise reaction to see that, you know, starting at 179, increasing to 209 with, you know, I understand COLA and looking at Bureau of Labor Statistic numbers and seeing all of that and how those rates could increase. But it just doesn't seem justifiable, again, in this constrained environment where people are struggling to buy homes and to put food on their table, that this is being passed right down to taxpayers. It just seems like it's a tough pill to swallow. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
We unmute Jerry.
You hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just wanted acknowledgement. So I think what you have to understand is I'm looking at an inflation calculator right now myself, and I can tell you over the years, let me just bring it up here. In 2022, inflation rate was 6.5, 2023 was 3.4, and 2024 it was 2.9. So my just rough juxtaposition of the inflation rates from the inflation calculator I'm looking at gives me a different number than the one you got. But that's really not particularly important in the grand scheme of things. What is important is the following. Vermont has the lowest ratio of employed public school individuals to students of all 50 states, 4.4 to 1, as opposed to the national average of 7.45 to 1. Those numbers from the Joint Fiscal Committee of the Vermont Legislature. Vermont has the second highest spending per pupil of all 50 states. And if you ask why is it so high, the answer is high salaries and what I consider to be a Rolls Royce of health insurance policies. And I want you to understand just how good their policy is. I am enrolled in a Medicare Advantage program. If you look at my health insurance premiums for that program, plus my maximum out-of-pocket expenses, for one individual, my total healthcare compensation package is basically the same as an individual in the South Burlington School District who is part of a family of 4. That is one individual, a partner, and 2 children. They're paying the same exact thing as I am for one person. They have this incredible health insurance policy, which has no incentive for maintaining their own health and covers their, once they go past $56,000 to $6,000, there's no upper limit to the amount of healthcare costs they can generate. And if you want to know why healthcare premiums are so expensive in the state, and we're number 1 in terms of the highest healthcare premium increases of all 50 states this year, it's because the packages that we offer to people are so extraordinarily expensive because they cover so much. So Ms. Nichols' salary may be high, but the real problem is across the board, salaries have gotten so high and compensation packages have gotten so high that the state in Montpelier is in a process of imploding. And that's why they have to come up with another program, because current spending on public schools statewide is simply non-sustainable. And those of you who have listened to me know I've said this over and over and over again. It's the same thing with the federal budget. Here's the calculation. Here's a homework assignment for everybody in the room. In the year 2000, the aggregate federal deficit was 5.7 trillion. Today, 24 years later, it's now $36.1 trillion. It's up almost 1,000% in a period of 24 years. Everybody knows that's not sustainable, but nobody's doing anything about it. It's the same thing with public school spending in the state of Vermont. The costs of spending are simply too high to be sustainable over the long time. So when the head of the Vermont NEA says we have to raise more money, he's really out to lunch. The problem is not raising more money. The problem is controlling the spending we're already doing. Yeah, Tim, you always do that. I want to say one thing to you, Tim. Listen, I pay more than $5,000 in education taxes. Do you think I should be entitled for $5,000 to speak for more than 2 to 3 minutes? You people talk for almost an hour on Viola Nichols' salary. Shouldn't you let the public, for the thousands of dollars they contribute, have a say to educate you as to the reality of public school spending in the state of Vermont? Is that too much to ask? You have children in the school system. I don't. So I'm paying for the education of your children. Shouldn't I have a right to comment for that?
Thank you, Jerry.
We unmute Lauren, please.
Hi there. So I was at the meeting earlier and had to leave to head home, but I just had a couple of thoughts as I was just listening to this. First of all, I appreciate that you cited the CPI calculator. However, CPI calculator is just one indicator, and I guess my question is more around how are we utilizing like actual comparables within the state of Vermont and specifically within Chittenden County to actually look at salary ranges. So as someone in the HR field, when I look at comps, I think about the area, so Chittenden County. I think about the industry. And I also think about like similar sized businesses, or in this case, school systems that look or maybe feel similar. So to cite a CPI calculator as the only form of metrics to determine someone's salary just seems to be a little misguided and without actually digging into like how do you look at compensation holistically. The other question I have is, so if we utilize this and we utilize the CPI calculator as our indicator, are we also going to be having our educators like being held to that same standard of utilizing the CPI calculator to determine what inflation is for their salary? Because again, this is if the superintendent is going to go along and say that that she shouldn't have to take a freeze if nobody else is, then our educators should be held to similar standards, which would then increase our budget and we'd be in a very different position. And then the only thing I want to comment on is to hear someone say the comment that these negotiations are old news is actually incredibly insulting to the community, because we have been asking since June to be part of these conversations and have been left to our own device and not heard and not responded to. So please don't belittle and say that it's old news for you, because it has not been old news for us. Thank you. I hope that you actually do take into consideration the comments of the community, which it seems like you're moving in a place that you're not. And I worry about that moving into the budget negotiations and teacher negotiations. So I'm just worried by what the precedent is you're setting for those upcoming things.
I want to be very careful not to commit the board to any sort of negotiation strategy. If our legal counsel was here, he would advise me very strongly not to make any sort of commitments. What I can say is the superintendent's salary in relation to other superintendent salaries in the state is consistent with teacher salaries in relation to other teacher salaries in the state, and support staff salaries in relation to other support staff salaries in the state. So it is in alignment with where our other collective bargaining agreements lie statewide. As for,
I disagree.
Actually, as to negotiation commitments, I'm not going to comment about that. Please come to the podium and state your name for the record, and if you're a resident of South Bend.
I'm not a resident, but I have a grandson that's been harassed and carried on, and Violet has known for months. I give her performance an F. And, you know, you people, it's all about money, 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 money. And then you cry, there's not enough for this or that. Teachers don't work any harder than the rest of us, and neither does Violet. Do you think the rest of the population gets all these bennies and top of the line health insurance plans and retirement? I mean, you want more and more and more, and 30% of South Burlington is living in poverty. So the rest of them have to pick it all up. It's got to end somewhere. And I have been talking to her for months about the racism, the bullying, the attacks, and she doesn't even follow your own policies. Do you have an answer for that? Over the weekend, there was a basketball game between South Burlington and CBU. South Burlington students attacked a CBU student, beat him up, several ones. You need to open your eyes to other than dollar signs. And she doesn't deserve all these raises. Yes, I'm emotional when I know what's going on over there. You need people from the outside to come in and investigate from her right down. And how many assistants does she have in this building? Does South Burlington really need all these people? My guess is no. The spending has to stop. You need to start doing common sense and protect these children's lives. I talked to other students when there was a gathering for a girl that was a previous student that committed suicide. They were standing in a circle, some of her friends. I asked, how many of you have been bullied at South Burlington schools? Every single one raised their hands. So you better stop thinking about dollars and follow your own policy. And the ones that attack need to be out of the school. They're not, one of them's not even a South Burlington resident, and you know it.
Thank you. Would you mind stating your name for the record, please?
Michelle Steady.
Thank you.
Again, in an effort to be transparent with the community, I want to provide feedback that the board is aware of the incidents cited by Michelle Steady and is absolutely not at liberty to disclose any of the details to the community. It's highly privileged information.
It's more than just what I know about, is what I'm saying.
To answer the question, there's one assistant in this central office.
One assistant?
One executive assistant.
The day I came, they all came rolling out. There was more than one. I think the staff is overpaid for what they do. You need to start the cuts from the top. And her raises aren't warranted. You're welcome.
Is there any other public comment on this topic?
My name is Christina Brown and I am a resident of South Burlington. I'm just following up on, I think it was Cindy's question about retirement. And I want to know if the district makes contributions directly to Violet Nichols' retirement fund, and when will the community have sort of that bottom line of what her total compensation package is likely to be?
I think I can answer that for you right now. I just want to make, what I'm afraid of doing is misrepresenting the factual information. So I want to make sure I very clearly understand what you're asking. So in what I cited about retirement, I'm happy to read that again.
Okay.
Cool. Every time I click this, it doesn't open and I have to go back to the process. You asking about the contract that we are talking about?
Yes.
With respect to retirement contribution to the district's 403B equal to 8% of Nichols' then effective annual salary, taking into account all performance adjustments and cost adjustments.
So are you saying an additional 8%?
An additional 8% to the retirement account.
In addition, so she gets her salary, her benefits, her performance, potential performance increases, and a lump sum into her retirement fund?
I just don't want to misstate this, but yes, I believe that what you're asking, that is correct. Or what you just stated is correct.
Okay. And so it seems as though the taxpayers should be entitled to know down to the penny how much that's going to be. So when will that information be shared?
I could share that information at the end of the week. I just want to make sure it's completely accurate.
Okay. And also, I think it's fantastic to hear that the board has a good working relationship with Violet. But obviously, that's not her entire job. And as someone who worked for this district for 35 years, I remember being surveyed about previous superintendents and about building level administrators, and our feedback was always sought out. Now, whether that feedback then guided any kind of contract negotiations, I'm not sure, but we were always asked, and that has not happened for several years now.
Can you tell me what years that was happening?
It happened during David Young's administration.
Because another piece to this, as I think about the board's approach to communicate effectively with the community, other boards have operated under modified policy governance. And modified policy governance means that certain aspects of the governance model are modified by the board to operate differently, which is not what we are currently operating under, but that may have been under the previous superintendent.
But didn't you say that started in 2009?
So these policies were adopted by the board in 2009, and they are policy governance policies, but that doesn't mean that a board wasn't operating under a modified policy governance. And this is where the community and the board need to be really clear on what the community expects of the board.
Okay, one more thing as I've been sitting here, I've been thinking about the preschool situation. And I think I understood that currently what's in the budget is to lose 2 preschool teachers, but add 3 interventionist positions. Is that correct? Do you know how many unfilled interventionist positions the district currently has?
Not off the top of my head.
But there are several. So the chances of being able to add 3 more seem to be pretty slim. So we're gonna be leaving those preschoolers and their families and all the teachers thereafter in kind of a bind if those kids are underserved.
And the way that the board would monitor that is through our monitoring reports. And I think that one of the places where I could see the board improving our communication is to provide scaffolding and information about monitoring reports before we review them at the board meeting, so that community members can understand what we are going to be monitoring and offer their perspective and questions about the data that's presented, and give us opportunities before we are seeking to take action on our monitoring report to address community concerns. Have I mentioned that we have open board seats? If you have policy governance and communications experience, it would be really valuable.
And even if you don't.
Kelsey, this is Kristen. I just wanted to step in real quick to clarify Tina's question. That isn't what's being suggested. The 3 interventionists are because we know that there are going to be needs across our district. That is not what we're suggesting for pre-K. So what we're suggesting for pre-K is that as we define the needs of our IEP students, we'll need to make those plans as we do for all of our IEP students. But the 3 interventionists are not specific to pre-K.
Feel that we've addressed all of the concerns that we've heard. I acknowledge that they haven't been satisfactorily addressed in
Not at all.
Some instances. It doesn't change as an individual board member, it does not change my opinion about what action should be taken. And I would like to hear from other board members if you're prepared to action on this now.
Yes, I'm prepared.
Laura?
Yep, yes, sorry.
And Karen isn't stating since she was not part of the contract negotiations. Check my data with you. I believe I executed this contract with you on November 7th. We also have that says November 7th. So not. During the motion to ratify and confirm in all respects authorization for the chair's execution on November 20th, 2024 of the employment contract extension agreement between the district and Superintendent Violet Nichols to be effective as of July 1, 2025, as per its terms and conditions.
So moved.
And moves, do I have a second?
Second.
Laura seconds. Any discussion? Let's do a roll call vote. Signify by saying aye or nay. Tim?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Over. Aye. And I vote aye, so the motion is approved unanimously with the board member abstaining. Thank you. So up next, we have agenda item 9, agenda planning, set the agenda for February 5th. Any agenda items that board members would like to have?
I think, sure. I don't know how we're gonna go about this, but I wonder if we have some type of legislative update as far as what's happening in the legislature.
Yeah, I've just been looking it over. It was a big, the SBA is sending something out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I just looked at all the slides, just multitasking. And they're gonna send out a synopsis. This may be all for nothing. It sounds like the overhaul that is about to happen is gonna be fairly, we're talking, I'm not gonna start spouting what he said, so that's what it's gonna be so radically different that will, if I'm sitting in next to, yeah. conversation.
Right.
And not very little to say about it. So, yeah. So the VSBA update, like either Tim or I could do it.
Maybe we could just review that as part of the,
Yeah.
so in the pub, that way the public's aware. I'm sure they may be aware, but it may be a good thing to make sure that.
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
else
So
knows.
Sue Siglowski, the president of VSBA, has been updating us throughout the day. So.
But you could see the writing on the wall.
Oh, yes,
the
you can.
daily presentations in the committee meetings,
Yeah, you
so.
can see it. So it's gonna be, it's gonna be something.
Sure.
So.
Okay, other than that, I have nothing.
I'm wondering, not for February 5th. I'm just thinking about upcoming meetings and creating time for board education and governance training and more communication plans that incorporate the feedback that we've heard and find significant ways to increase our transparency with the community. I'm not sure exactly when would be the best time to have that conversation. I feel like we're going to be losing some board members and thus losing, potentially, maybe, losing some experience, and then we'll be gaining new members with new experience and new perspectives. So let's just, maybe we put it on our future agenda items and try to start to develop what will be our time process to improving our performance in this respect.
So that would be the agenda item or,
Yeah, I also realistically want to. I'm thinking about, my capacity to prepare this kind of information between now and February 5th. It's fairly diminished.
right, and we still have quite a bit going on with the budget at that point, I'm not sure. So maybe we leave this agenda as light as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else for agenda item 9, agenda planning? Agenda item 10, consent agenda. So everyone has an opportunity to review all of the consent agendas.
Yes.
Any questions?
No.
The consent agenda items are approved. Which brings us to agenda item 11, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Laura moves, do I have a second?
Second.
Tim seconds, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned at 9:36 p.m.